You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Hello everyone, welcome back to episode 101 of Arsenal Pass. This is the Outsiders Limited set review. Hayden Dale here, Brendan Patrick. We're going to get basically straight into this, Brendan, but just one quick question for you first is, you've just gone through and done your set review. How are you feeling now about Outsiders Limited?
Well, I felt good about it before, to be honest, from when we did our constructed pod. But I feel great. I think the set looks really, really good. I was pretty surprised in terms of my ratings. Like, I had a lot of C's, I think, which is not a bad thing. It's actually kind of a good thing, but more than usual, I didn't have any cards that were like really popping out as kind of like bombs, or it's like, this is a card I absolutely want. There were a few, don't get me wrong, but I feel like in some past sets, I've just snapped onto some cards, and like even some heroes have been like, this hero is just like way better than the other heroes. Yeah,
6 hero set is really interesting. I'm excited that you've just said that, because I have some cards where I think there's some really strong. I think my kind of first take on the set is the rares look really good. For the most part, some look quite bad, but yeah. Well, just cover off news as we always do. Just kind of high level stuff. We did a giveaway on last week's pod on episode 100. We are recording episode 101, this limited set review, basically the day after that pod dropped. So we're going to actually announce the winner of that in episode 102. So you've still got another week to get your entries in for that. Hop on to episode 100 on the YouTube comments there, drop a comment. And if you leave us a review on ratethispodcast.com, you get 2 times the entries for doing that as well. So you can get yourself 3 entries, right, Brendan, if you go and do all things.
Yeah, so it's ratethispodcast.com/ArsenalPass. Ideally, you use that platform and able to submit the review, because when you use Rate This Podcast, we do get a specific email that tells us like, this person did that. I will go check Apple Podcasts just in case anybody didn't use that, but sometimes Apple Podcasts is a processing time. So yeah, don't get caught with Apple Podcasts. Just hit it with ratethispodcast.com/ArsenalPass.
And Brendan likes to get the little prompt for the review so we can have a little chuckle, because we know how much like Brendan loves a little funny review. I think all the ones so far are pretty serious. Other than that, yeah, get yourself in the draw. Limited time only. The Arsenal Pass limited podcast that's running for the Outsiders season just dropped episode 1 by the time this is out as well. You can go and see myself and Yuan Ji Lee talk about all things Outsiders pre-release. Had a really fun time doing that. And Brendan, the reviews are in. The critics are saying the genius of Brendan Patrick and Hayden Dale at Arsenal Pass have struck gold again with limited time only. So, it's already, rave reviews are in.
Great.
In all seriousness, go check that out if you want some tips on the limited season. And we've got a whole host of guests to join me over the next 10 weeks, including Mr. Brendan Patrick himself next week, as we break down our experience at the pre-release and our sort of first thoughts after getting cards in our hand of Outsiders Limited. So, looking forward to that. Otherwise, Brendan, let's get into the main topic. Just before we get into the cards, there's a few things for us to cover, some notes, things like that. This set review that we do, this is our 4th limited set review. We covered Monarch, we did Tales of Aria, Uprising. I feel like we're season pros at this now, but this is a commons and rares only. This is a limited set review. The reason we don't focus on Majestics, 1 is time, and 2 is that those cards are opened a lot less frequently, have less impact in sealed. Brendan, I think this month's Patreon pod, though, might be a limited set review of the Majestics, so look out for that if you are a Patreon. And we can't cover everything. We do our best. I want to kind of point out that we do give grades, and we'll go through the grades in a second, but the grades are a guide. They're a way to compare and contrast cards together, and I think what's more important is the comments and the sort of the advice and the feelings that me and Brendan have on these cards in the discussion, as opposed to the grades, right?
It's important to note, if you're coming from a game like Magic and maybe you're new to Fab, the grades aren't really a sort of like pick order or pick hierarchy. Like in Flesh and Blood, it is very important for your deck to be synergistic and to work, especially on terms of like your resource curve and what supporting cards you have in your deck. So although a card might be rated as a C or a C minus, or even something as an A, it needs to be fit into the right deck usually for it to be effective.
Yeah, definitely. The modality of Flesh and Blood cards always leads to these limited set reviews being 1, difficult, 2, interesting, and 3, really funny when we look back at some of the grades, as Brendan pointed out to me before the pod with my grades from Uprising. So I didn't get them all wrong, right? It's just a couple of cards that I was way off on. But we come back to
the best cards in the set, by the way.
A couple of the best cards. And one of the worst cards.
Yep.
All right, so our early grades, as I say, we will come back and we will review these. So, Brendan, I'm just going to quickly go through the rating scale before we start to dive into some stats as well on the set. So, if you've never seen an Arsenal Pass Limited set review before, it's pretty simple. We follow an A, B, C, D grading scale with a couple of side and subgrades. A's, these are the best of the best cards. These are the cards that you want to open. These are your pack one, pick ones, and draft. I could throw a couple of things from previous sets, Crippling Crush, Hardened Cross Trap, Throne of Brutality, and Welcome to Wraith via the Vanguard. Maybe you've only played Uprising, Vendor's Fighting Spirit Red, Sash of Sandakai, Red Brothers in Arms, those sorts of cards. And then move on to our B's. These are our above average role players. So they're doing an important job in our deck and they're overperforming a lot of the time the expectation of an average card in the deck. So from the last set, these would be things like Embermore Centipede Red, Mounting Anger Red, Aether Hail Blue and Red. These sorts of cards are going to be really important in the deck and are going to help you get above rate or help you win games and push damage. And then our Cs, these are your true role players. This is kind of the benchmark of cards you want as the majority of your deck are going to be made up of Cs. I mean, in an ideal world, they'd be made up of Bs and As, right, Brendan? But let's be realistic. A lot of the time, it's going to be a big chunk of Cs. These, as I say, your true role players. If we think in the past set, this would be things like Brain Freeze Blue, Dust Runner Outlaw Red, Miraga even. These are cards that are going to do the dirty work for you, do the day in, day out jobs. And I can maybe some other ones from previous sets. Think Below Yellow, Throttle Red, Smash Instinct Yellow, things like this. And then the Ds, these are the cards that you want to play as little of as possible. These are the pure filler at best, and sometimes it's just going to be actually just worse than having, 29 cards in your deck, for instance. Maybe even a Crack Bobble at times might be better than a D-, for instance. Think about Yellow Brain Freeze in the last set, at least that block for 3. Yellow Sand Cover, particularly. Rebellious Rush, particularly yellow in that one. Liquefy, that was a definite D- in the last set. And then our kind of two sort of subgrades or side grades, we have setup grades that we give sometimes. These are cards that you really need to have a build around for. Sigil of Permafrost in the last set, I probably should have given a setup grade to Brendan, and maybe even Phoenix Form as a card that it might be, an average role player, but with the right sort of setup can be a B plus, maybe even an A card. And then Cyborg grade, these are cards that are not going to probably make the main deck of your deck for every matchup, but they're going to be important for certain matchups. Think Singe in the last set for Wizard into Dromize, or even Sigil of Protection if you were going first, was quite a relevant Cyborg card. So those are the grades, Brendan. I've got some stats as well. I'm going to throw those your way before we get into it. Average defense value. We always like to talk about average defense value of a set to kind of set the stage of maybe how fast the format's going to be, but also how good defending is and just what you can expect to happen when you're talking about like leaking damage and defending out cards. So the average defense value of Outsiders is 2.36. Now this is comparative to 2.41 in Uprising. And what we mean by this is all the defense values of the cards and then averaged out. This includes, your 2 blocks, your 3 blocks, your no blocks. So it gives a sort of an aggregate of cards in the set and how well the set defends. So 2.36 in the set, 2.41 in Uprising. This is comparative to 2.24 in Monarch, although brute cards that defend for 0 really skewed that. Tails was 2.26, although we had, of course, defense reactions and also Briar in that set with the token. The reason I think that we look at 2.36 in the set is that we do have a lot of 3 defense class cards, especially for Assassin and Ranger, but then majority of all the generics apart from a common and rare, apart from Come to Fight, I believe, defend for 2, and then a lot of the ninja cards defend for 2 in the set as well. So I think there's a lot of nuance to this 2.36, and we're going to talk about it as we get into the set review, I think, Brendan.
Yeah, I honestly expected it to be a little bit higher, looking at all the 3 blocks I had seen. But I guess it does make sense. A lot of those ninja cards do block for 2, and I think the most interesting sort of benchmark here is Monarch being 2.24. Just a set that was classically very tough to defend in, lots of 2 blocks.
Yes. It's interesting because I actually thought it might be a little bit lower because I was comparing it to Monarch a little bit because the generics, I was looking, I was like, man, all these generics defend for 2 and all these ninja cards, but then so many of the class cards in Ranger and Assassin, actually majority defend for 3, even the attack reactions, which we'll definitely talk about. So that's quite interesting. Just a couple other stats. There's 6 defense reactions in the set at Rare, 3 Ranger, 3 Hybrid, and then there's 3 more at Majestic, which we won't be covering today. There's 3 attack reactions. These are all cycles in the set. So while the defense reactions are single cards, there is 3 attack reaction cycles, so 9 effectively. 1 cycle at Assassin Ranger Hybrid, 1 cycle at Assassin for common, and then 3 more red ones, Assassin Rares, which when we talk about those cards, I'll tell you what. 2 cycles of Instants. These are both generic damage prevention effects. And then Assassin has 33 class cards, Ranger has 39 cards, and Ninja has 39 cards. So it makes a lot of sense when you realize that the hybrids are all hybrids are Assassin, and then half a Ninja, half Ranger, which we will get into. Quickly, Brendan, just some things on keywords. I won't go over the returning keywords, but there is a lot of returning keywords in the set. Traps, of course, aim counters, opt is coming back. But we do have a new type of card. We have quiver, and it's important to remember that for the two rangers, Riptide and Azalea, you get to start with these quivers as tokens. We also have some new effect keywords, stealth. Now remember, as LSS has pointed out, stealth does nothing by itself, but enables a lot of things with Azuri, of course, and there's some conditional things that require a stealth attack to be targeted. And then we have some new tokens, which we're about to get into.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the tokens that are in the set, the three new ones that are going to feature heavily in Outsiders. First one is Bloodrot Pox. So Bloodrot Pox is a generic token aura, and it says at the beginning of your end phase, destroy Bloodrot Pox, then it deals 2 damage to you unless you pay 3 resources. So we're going to see a lot of ways for this card to be made. Next one up is Frailty, which is also new to the set. Inertia, which is new. Oh, Frailty, yes, Frailty. Inertia, which is next. At the beginning of your end phase, destroy Inertia, then put all cards from your hand and arsenal on the bottom of your deck. Again, generic token aura. And the last one is Frailty. Your attack action cards played from arsenal and weapon attacks have -1 attack. At the beginning of your end phase, destroy Frailty, and then Ponder returns, as well as, of course, Crackball, which you can get access to.
Yeah, and let's talk about the heroes. I'll go ahead and try to read Azuri first. It is a mouthful. So Azuri is one of the assassin heroes at 20 health. It says, once per turn, attack reaction, banish a card from your hand face down. Turn the card banished this way face up. If it's an attack action card with cost 2 or less, put target attacking card with stealth from the active chain link on the bottom of its owner's deck. Then put the banished card onto the active chain link as the attacking card. Okay, and after that, we have Arachne, Solitary Confinement. This one's simple, but it starts at 19 health. Your first attack with stealth each turn has go again. Coming back, we have Benji, the Piercing Wind. Benji starts at 17 health. Your attack action cards with 2 or less attack can't be defended by cards from hand. The first time an attack action card you control hits each turn, your next attack gains +1. Old Reliable in the form of Katsu. The first time an attack action card you control hits each turn, you may discard a card with cost 0. If you do, search your deck for a card with combo, banish it, then shuffle. You may play it this turn. Heading on to the Rangers, we have Sturdy Boy Riptide, 19 health. Whenever you play a card from hand, you may put a card from your hand face down into your arsenal. Whenever a trap you control triggers, deal 1 damage to the attacking hero. And everybody's favorite, Azalea, 20 health. Once per turn action, 0 cost. Put a card from your arsenal on the bottom of your deck. If you do, put the top card of your deck face up into your arsenal. If it's an arrow, it gains Dominate until end of turn. Go again.
All right, let's get into the cards, Brendan. We're gonna start with the assassins. This time around, we're gonna go through. I think you'll see as we go, but we're starting with assassin. And we'll go one by one, right? I think so. Reading these cards. Backstab is the first card that we look at here. This is a assassin attack action at rare. It costs 0, and at red it attacks for 3. The full cycle defense for 3. It has stealth as a keyword, and says defense reactions can't be played to backstab's chain link. General thoughts on this card, Brendan? First card up.
Well, I'm second guessing myself because you're like, oh, the assassin rares are so good. But I have this as like a C or a B minus. I think in red, like as assassin, you're just going to want 0 for 3s that block for 3. Like I think that's just where you want to be. A lot of cards do fill that role. Defense reactions not being able to be played to the chain link. I don't know if it's incredibly relevant in limited, but it seems non-zero. So I think this is just kind of a filler role player card.
Yeah. I didn't mean to scare you. I feel the same way about this.
I was actually super scared. I was like, what am I not seeing here?
What have I missed? No. I feel the exact same. I think backstab is a solid C at red. I think the yellow and blue are honestly probably like even D plus C minus range. Like we can talk about this a bit more with like Azuri, but I think you want the yellows a bit more in Azuri. But I think in like Solitary Confinement, like these yellows are going to be just underrated. Like these cards are already pushing the rate you want, right? So in Solitary Confinement, you can give the first one go again. That feels like a head jab, right? And it blocks a 3. That's really cool. And the text on this one isn't irrelevant. Some of them are more relevant. But once you get into the yellows, they're pretty awkward. The one thing I will say is that you do want a lot of blues, I think, in Assassin, like upwards of 13, 14 blues because of the daggers. Like half your deck being blue is not unreasonable. You can treat it like Guardian a little bit. So I think blues that defend 3 can be pretty hot.
All right, and next up we have... Sorry, one sec. Yeah, there we go. Sneak Attack. This is an assassin attack action at rare, and we're looking at the red. It costs 2, attacks for 3, defense for 2, but it has some cheeky text on it. It says, if you played or activated an attack reaction, this chain link Sneak Attack has +4. Hayden, your thoughts?
Yeah, my first thought is really good number of reacts in the set, and if you can get them into your deck, this card is going to gain a lot of value, right? The base of this at 2 for 3 is bad. You don't want that in your deck. Defensive 2 as well. Sucks, right? But if you can turn this into a 2 for 7, now we're starting to talk, because not only will it be a 2 for 7, but in reactions, it's probably going to be 2 for 8, 9, 10, right?
Yeah.
Like realistically, because you have to play a reaction. It is important to note that Azuri's Hero Ability is a reaction, so it would satisfy this ability. But if we're thinking about like Solitary Confinement, for instance, you're going to want some reactions to play on this, or if you just play this from hand. So I think this probably for me sits like definitely at red, at least sits around like that B- kind of range. And I think it's going to sit between like it could sit anywhere, honestly, from like a C to like a B+, depending on what your deck looks like, I think.
Yeah, I had this as a B+. It is definitely slightly a bit of a build around, especially if you're in Arachne Solitary Confinement. But I just see this being kind of a really annoying card in Limited, where this comes down as a 2 for 3, and you're playing against Arachne Solitary Confinement in particular, and it just becomes like a 2 for 10. Well, actually, I mean, you add another card into there, obviously, with the attack reaction, but it's just so much damage out of nowhere that it's really, really, really hard to play around, in my opinion.
Yeah, like imagine a scenario where you come in with this, right? So you have one card left in hand, and you play this, and your opponent goes, okay, is this coming in for 3? Is it coming in for 7? Is it coming in for 8? Is it coming in for 10? And they gonna like hedge with a double block, and you just go, okay, just Arsenal this card. Like, there's also scenarios like that. This card is gonna be tough to play. I think you're more on track with like the B+ rating. I think if you're in Assassin and reactions are gonna be premium in Assassin anyway, if you have these cards, I think this is the kind of card you want. So I think overall this card is really good.
This is a card I think that every time my opponent plays it against me and they have less or more than 0 cards in hand, I'm gonna groan. Because like you said, I mean, it's the damned if you do, damned if you don't with the attack reaction, right? If you overblock this, they just arsenal the attack reaction and they're still in a great spot, and you've lost value on the double block. I think it's a great card in Limited.
CNC pummel problem.
Yeah.
All right, next up is Spike with Blood Rot. Dude, the art in the set is... They've taken a next step up. I mean, I think there's a reason this is a 16+ game, right? So no cycle to note with Spike of Blood Rot, so it's only at red. This is a rare assassin attack reaction. It costs 1 and defensive 3, and says target attack action card with stealth gains +3 attack, and when this hits a hero, create a Blood Rot Pox token under their control. Brendan?
Yeah, so this one has the highest rate. I mean, it's going to be consistent across the entire limited set review, where I'm going to rate Blood Rot Pox effects higher over others. Because the conditional effect of this card, where if this hits a hero, like that's going to happen pretty much every time with an attack reaction. And a Blood Rot Pox effectively makes this 1 for 5, which is an incredibly powerful attack reaction, especially when it blocks for 3. So I have this at B, and I think this could even creep up into the B+. Like, I think this is a card that if I'm in the lane of playing an assassin, I'm probably snap picking this up as soon as I see it, as soon as I feel like I've landed in that class.
I even think this could just be pack one, pick one. Like, I think this might be, I think there's, as I was saying earlier, kind of alluding to a lot of good rares in the set. This is one that I think is really up there. I think this is, for me, is like a solid B+, and it could even upgrade to like an A-. Effectively, if you think about this, that because of that, yes, there is defense reactions in the set, but they come in the form of these 0 for 3s in Ranger. And breakpoints are quite important in the set as well. Like, if you can, this can represent 1 for 5, like 1 cost for 5, and that works really well with like a 0 cost stealth. Like, you have a blue in hand, you have this, and a 0 cost stealth, and I think that lines up really well. You come in with dagger. Now all of a sudden, potentially you're getting the debuff on your opponent's cards, so they can't even like block your stealth card that well. You're already at a breakpoint, and then all of a sudden you're like presenting your last resource into 5 damage. Like, Blood Rot Pox token, like Brendan was saying, I'm also valuing that token higher than the other two, significantly actually. And yeah, I think this is like a solid B+, and I think this could be in contention for like pack one, pick one.
Yeah, we talked about this in the constructed podcast about Outsiders, but I think if you look at the design of the codexes in particular, which are at Majestic, so I won't be talking about them today, you can see pretty clearly that Legend Story Studios also values Blood Rot Pox the highly across all the tokens. All right, so next up we have Spike with Frailty. This is an assassin attack reaction at rare. It costs 1. This is at red. Blocks for 3. When an attack action card with stealth, target attack action card with stealth gains +3. When this hits a hero, create a Frailty token under the control. So same thing as the last card, except it's going to be a Frailty token. The Frailty token is, I think, the weakest one, potentially, because it does affect cards just from Arsenal in terms of the attack actions. But I do think that Frailty is particularly punishing against the ninjas, because they will be using Kodachis, and it affects the weapons. Assassin also has weapons. It's important, but they do cost a lot more. I think ninjas are going to consistently be attacking with both Kodachis more than an assassin. I have this at a C+. I just think that these attack reactions that block for 3 and +3 and have an upside on top of that are great. But this one is just significantly worse than Blood Rot Pox, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I would value so I'm trying to value these tokens, and I think the Inertia is the worst one, which we're about to talk about. But I think Frailty, especially against the ninjas and even the assassin, to be honest, because giving that -1 means that they can't hit with that Spider's Bite effect, which can actually be worth more than 1 damage. It can be, because then if you're blocking with the card, that's another damage that you're saving that's not being taken off your attack minimum. So this can actually almost often, especially against, as I say, assassin ninja, be another 1 for 5. It can really cause some issues. So I have this at a B. I just think also these cards block for 3, which is, I think, really important in the set. And it has the added benefit of, like, this doesn't get hit by Spider's Bite as well. Like, so if Spider's Bite does hit you, this still blocks for 3. Whereas a lot of the cards that you're going to block for 3 with outside of these reactions and defense reactions are your attack actions, and it's just not going to work. So I think Spike the Frailty can be a 1 for 4, sometimes a 1 for 5, minimum a 1/3 or block for 3, and push on hit effects. I think this is like a solid B for me.
Yeah, I think I could definitely be talked up to that as well. Considering the sort of synergy between some of these cards and having attack reactions just in your deck, when we saw a Seek Attack, like, it just increases the sort of the stake of this kind of card drastically, I think. So yeah, I could be talked up to a B for sure.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Next one is Spike with Inertia. It's the same thing as the attack actions that we've just talked about, except this one gives an Inertia token on hit. I think this is the worst of the cycle. I think Inertia is going to be a lot more relevant and constructed. Now, Inertia does have some value when it comes to the ranges, of course, in the set, but and against cards like Death Touch or the Virulent Touch card. Is it called Virulent Touch? The one that's 0 for 4 at red. The Post Malone card, as people
Virulent something. Virulent definitely in there.
But yeah, again, still, it's a block 3. It's an attack reaction, which I think is premium, and the Inertia is not completely irrelevant, but I do think it's significantly worse. I think this one's in the C+ to B- range. It's the kind of role player. It's the card that you're not going to first pick, but it's the kind of thing you're looking to get early once you're an assassin to trigger the things that you want, like Sneak Attack.
Yeah, I mean, I had this at C+, and the exact notes I wrote were, it is kind of good against Rangers, I guess, but I do think that Inertia is, like, way more important in Constructed than it is in Limited. In Limited, your opponent can simply play without the Arsenal, and yeah, if you want a use case or sort of an example of that, just look at Uprising, where people frequently played without Arsenals in order to pressure as much damage as possible, just turn to turn.
And play around Glacial Horns.
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly. So next up, we have Infect. This is Assassin attack action. We're looking at the red one. Costs 0, attacks for 3, blocks for 3, has stealth, and says when this hits a hero, create a Blood Rot Pox token under their control. Hayden?
It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Blood Rot Pox token.
Yeah.
It's a bit
I'll get it eventually, maybe after the next 50 cards.
I was struggling earlier. I think this is the best of the 0 for 3s with stealth. The reds, the cycle, the stealth 0 cost cycle, because I think it's good at red. I think it's good at yellow. I think it's good at blue. I think that the 3 can be a breakpoint in the set as well. So I think the red is still better than the yellow and blue, but I think the whole cycle is good. And the reason I say 3 can be a breakpoint is because of Spider's Bite. You hit with the Spider's Bite because it's so bad value to block that often. And then all of a sudden, this is coming for 3. Even their 3 block attacks now defend for 2, causing a breakpoint. And at red, this is threatening 0 for 5, yellow 0 for 4, blue 0 for 3. And again, I mean, blue is just blocking for 3. So I think all round, it's like a B- for me, and like a C+ in the yellow and blue. But I do think this card is the best of the cycle. Could even be a B, to be honest.
Yeah, I had a B- on this. My note is just you're going to just want to have red 0 for 3s in your deck. And if you can get the one with the most upside, good for you. I really like this as a supporting blue as well. Not that I wouldn't take the red over the blue, but just the fact that the blue is going to have to eat up a piece of equipment or trade inefficiently up for a card in hand, because the blue's threatening 0 for 3. It's a very, very good card.
Yeah, and equipment's at a premium because of these breakpoints, and we're going to get to more of them once we get into the Rangers and the Ninjas and stuff as well. And not only that, but like you say, it's like, what if you play this blue and then you just throw an attack reaction on it all of a sudden? It's just like...
Yeah, blue sneak attack, it's like 2 for 7.
Yeah. Or even like, so say you play Infect and then you throw one of the spikes that we just talked about on top of it, even the blue. Now you've turned your blue into a 0 for 3 and you've turned your attack reaction into a 1 for 5. It's great value. It's really good value. Next up is Isolate. Again, another 0 for 3 at common assassin attack action, so defense of 3 as well. And we're looking at the red, of course, when we say 0 for 3. And it has stealth again, and dominate is the keyword on this one. So unlike, of course, we just looked about infect, where it has an on-hit effect, this one is just a keyword of dominate. I think this is just like true role player.
Yep,
it's going to have some, just like a hard C. The yellow is a D, I think, though. I think the yellows, this is the worst, I think, of maybe the yellow cycle.
Yeah, I think some players might fall into the trap of overvaluing dominate in something like limited. I do think that, having a singular or, a copy of this card can help you close out a game if there is some sort of prevalent fatigue or pile strategy in the format. The stake of this card would go up. But in general, a 0 for 3 dominate is pretty close to a blank text box usually most of the time. It's 0 for 3 is something you want in your deck, especially when it does block for 3 as well. So it's just a solid C for me.
I mean, there are some things with like Azuri, right, where like this has dominance, they can only block with 1 card, and then you swap in a 6 attack when they're on like 1 or 2 life, and you put it through that way. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So next up we have Malign Assassin attack action. Looking at the red, cost 0, attacks for 3, defense for 3, has stealth, and it says damage that would be dealt by Malign can't be prevented. So I think this is only really interacting with those couple instants that prevent damage. So I have it as a C-. Like, I think it also is just kind of a C in terms of like the text box is not too relevant. But I do think that this is probably worse than Dominate.
Oh yeah, I think this actually is the worst one. I think I also have this as a C-. I think the yellow is pure garbage fire D, and the blue is fine again because it blocks for 3. Like you're gonna just want these 3 defense blue cards, and then you in some decks you are gonna need this card as like pure filler because you need the stealth attacks, right? But C-. Next up we have Prowl. Again, another of the cycle of our red cards. Well, there's a full cycle of them, but assassin attack action, we're looking at the red one. Cost 0, attacks for 3, defense for 3, has stealth, and says the next attack action with stealth, you play this combat chain, gains +1. I think this is where we're getting out of the kind of filler range with this one to a bit more of the premium in these 0 for 3s. I think the red definitely is a C+, and the rest might just be Cs, like solid players. The reason I say the red is, again, because you can cause 3 to be a breakpoint with Spider's Bite, which is really relevant. So yeah, I think, if you can turn this into a 0 for 4 effectively by getting that trigger.
Yeah, so I had B- for this. I do think like it seems like it's going to be a 0 for 4 a lot of the time. Or at least like if you're playing Arachne Solitary Confinement, a lot of times it's effectively a 0 for 4. I don't think it's quite as powerful as the Blood Rot Pox, but I do think it's notably, like it's significantly above like the Dominate or Damage Can't Be Prevented. I do feel like Prowl is a card is like once I'm in, if I think I'm playing Arachne Solitary Confinement, and by the way, it's going to be so interesting that you're drafting your cards and picking your hero post because you have 2 hero options now in Assassin. Like this is a card if I'm like, okay, my deck's looking like it's going to be Arachne Solitary Confinement. I want a lot of Prowls, to be honest. Like I think Prowl's like a freaking incredible card in Arachne Solitary Confinement. I think it's definitely like a B- in that hero specifically.
Interesting. I think you might be right. So I've done one kind of like janky kind of tried to play a sealed on like Teleshar, and I played Arachne Solitary Confinement, and one of the things I did find is that I don't really want to play a second stealth card in a lot of my turns. Like partly I just didn't have them, but also partly I wanted to end with like a Spring Load or a Humble or like a bigger attack as opposed to another stealth card was the only thing I did find. But what I would say is that the reason I have this at like a C+ and not a C is that it does give potential value to some of your like yellows and blues as well. But I think a lot of the time, sometimes you're just not even going to be able to trigger this effect even if you hit, which is a little bit awkward.
All right, so next up we have Sedate. This is an assassin attack action at red, costs 0, attacks for 3, blocks for 3, has stealth, and says when this hits a hero, create an inertia token under their control. I have this as a C. I think it's just a true role player. We talked about inertia being worse than Blood Rot Pox. So, the red one, I think that you pick it up when it comes around, if you're filling out your deck. But other than that, it's nothing to write home about.
Yeah, I think all the on hits are slightly better than the non-on hits, but this is one of the worst on hits, so I agree. I think it's like a solid C. Next up, we have Wither, continuing with the cycle. The last of these cycle of assassin attack actions. It's a 0 cost again. We're looking at red, attacks for 3, defense for 3, has stealth, and when this hits a hero, create a frailty token under the control. Again, I just said that I think the on hits are important, the best of these cycle of 0 for 3s at red, and I think this one is, it's not Blood Rot Pox, it's not Infect, but I think it's probably the next best thing, maybe alongside prowl like we just talked about. So I have this the same, like a C plus definitely for red, and even the yellow and blue, they have on hit effects that's relevant. So I think C plus all around.
Yep, same for me. All right, next up we have Razor's Edge. This is an assassin attack reaction. We're looking at red. It costs 0, blocks for 3, and says target attack action with stealth, which is really important. Gains +3 attack. I have this as a B minus. I think it could be a B, to be honest. I'm not too sure. Like if we look at some past sets that had a lot of attack reactions, or just one that comes to mind for me, it's like Welcome to Wraith, where there was a lot of defense reactions to combat that. I think the defense reactions in this set and the ways to prevent attack reactions, because we have the preventative damage stuff as well, are significantly worse in a set like Welcome to Wraith, which actually makes the attack reactions quite a bit better. You're looking at Assassin, like this card turns on other cards. It like sneak attack, it pumps it, and you're paying 0 for this. So you can do this with sneak attack, and you can have 3 cards, which you could, because sneak attack usually does cost 1, so maybe your 1 cost is okay. But say you did have to pitch a yellow, it's just like this card is very flexible, I feel, and I feel like this is just a card. If I'm an assassin, I probably want I would say, with a caveat, as much as I can get, because I'm not going to get an infinite amount, but I would think I would want like quite a few of these.
Yeah, also you want to make sure you don't draw a hand of all attack reactions. But yeah, I'm on the same page. I think the only kind of like reason, so I think you said it B minus, which you have pretty similar to like the spike with cards. The only reason I have the spike with cards quite a reasonable bit higher is I think they have added bonus. They have like they can get to being value of 5, 4 pretty easily. And they cost 1, and I don't think the difference between 0 and 1 cost is actually very relevant in Assassin, because you're playing so many of these 0 costs, and your weapon costs 2, so playing off a blue, and I think you want to play a lot of blues, doesn't really change your cost structure. But on the flip side of that, it blocks a 3. I think all the attack reactions, to be honest, for the most part, are gonna be playable. So I think this is like a solid C plus for me, maybe a solid C for like the yellow and blue. But again, a card that blocks 3, like these are cards I want.
Yeah. So what I really like about 0 cost in particular is, and especially in a set with Ninja, where on hit effects are going to be pretty prevalent and can be somewhat devastating. I think that being able to block with 2 cards when you need to, and then having a very relevant attack on your cycle is pretty good. So like 2 cards, you play your 0 cost card plus the pump, and maybe it has an on hit effect as well. I think that's a really powerful sort of turn cycle for you as Assassin.
Definitely. I mean, if you put an infect and you pump this, that's what I'm saying. Those 0 for 3 attack actions with on hits are super relevant, and I think these Razor's Edge get better the more of those you have as well. So you can play those 2 card hands or even 3 card hands, whatever it looks like.
Right. Well, on to Ninja. We're going to start with the equipment. So we have Mask of Many Faces. This is a head slot for Ninja only. At common, has 1 defense and says instant 1 resource. Destroy Mask of Many Faces. Name a card. The next attack action card you play this turn gains that name. And it has Blade Break, which means when the combat chain closes, if you defend it with this, destroy it. Hayden, your thoughts?
I was hoping you were going to go first. I'm going to go out on this one, and this is an A minus for me.
I wish I could screenshot my rating for you, so you could believe me when I actually rated this as an A.
I believe you. I think this card is really good, and I don't think it's a particular surprise, to be honest. This is going to help you fix some crazy strong combo line turns. If you ever played Katsu and Welcome to Wraith and in draft or sealed, and you sometimes you're like, man, like this hand is almost like 15, 20 damage, but it's missing X. It's like Mask of Many Faces is going to fix that for you. The problem a lot of the time is, in sealed, I think this is going to be an all-star, because a lot of the time in sealed, the problem you have is that you open some combo pieces but not the right starter or something. This is on friggin' demand. This is just there. Yes, it costs a resource, but it's going to turn your turn into what you need it to be, and mean that you can have some of these combo cards without necessarily the starters, and that is huge, I think. So I think Mask of Many Faces is like a solid A minus, and Blade Break equipment is just good. Although there is a lot of competition at the hit slot, I think this is the best one, to be honest. Yeah,
I do think it's quite a bit better than what it competes with at the head slot. So head slot is the most competitive, I think, by far in terms of equipment slots. But Mask of Many Faces for Ninja just seems like it kind of blows the others out of the water.
Yeah, when we say competitive, we mean there's a lot of hit slot options. Next up, we have Bonds of Ancestry. So talking about a card that you can really pop off with if you have Mask of Many Faces. This is at rare Ninja attack action, cost 2, and at red attacks for 4. There is a cycle of these, and defense for 3. And as combo, says if a card with Gust Wave in its name was the last attack this combat chain, this costs 2 less to play and has go again. And when this attacks, you may banish a card with combo from your graveyard. If you do, search your deck for a card with the same name, banish it, then shuffle. You may play it this combat chain. I've just read a novel, Brendan, so thoughts?
Yeah, so I had this at like a B minus. Like I think that this card is really, really good and constructed because you have access to Whelming Gustwave, but here we only have access to the single Gustwave, if I'm correct, which I think makes it still very, very good, but harder to pull off. The fact that you have to have your graveyard also filled up with the relevant attack to search for, it is a hoop to jump through. I do think that the games where you get this off are going to be games I think that you win more than you lose. So I do have it as B minus.
If you can turn this into a 0 for 8, which is effectively what you can do, it costs 0 if you've got the combo active with Gustwave, it means 2 less. And then if you're able to banish like a blue the new league tap, and then go and get like the red league tap. I mean, I guess that costs 1 resource. So you can turn it into a 1 for 8.
So that's like quick, right?
Yeah, that's crazy, right? Like that is, even if you go and get like a red recoil or something, so it's a 0 for 7, like that is really, really good. Now, the problem is that if this is a 2 for 4 or a 2 for 3 or a 2 for 2, that's bad. Like that is like D territory at that point, right? So yeah. I think I'm going to give this card a build around, but I think it's going to be reasonably, I don't want to say simple, but I think you're going to be able to build around this quite a consistent amount of time. And one of the cards that's going to be really key to that is Mask of Many Faces. Like if you just play your 0 cost like Head Jab or whatever, you pop your Mask of Many Faces and turn it into a Descendant Gustwave. Give it the Descendant Gustwave name, and all of a sudden you play Bonds of Ancestry. Like you're ready to party, right? So I think I think Bonds of Ancestry, and there's also Light Water, which we'll talk about very soon, which can have a similar effect. So I think I'm going to give this like a soft build around like B plus, but
yeah, I could see it being a build around like A minus, to be honest, when you say it like that, because a 0 for 8, like if we learn anything from past limited sets, like if you ever go that far above curve, like a 0 for 8, I know you do lose a piece of equipment. That like the game of like a game of limited should just be instantly over. Like they exist on very fine margins. So I think if you ever get a 0 for 8 out of this, it's just like the game's done.
Yeah, or like you have this sitting in Arsenal, you can maybe like sit it for a couple of turns because of the way Katsu plays in this format. You find your Surging Strike, and then your opponent's like, okay, let it hit. Immediately Katsu, go and find my Descendant Gustwave, and like my turn is bonkers. I gave this a build around, and I think it's an A build around actually, the more we talk about it. But even just like picking this card up early, it's probably like, if you wanted to aggregate it out, it's somewhere around like I'm just going to say it's a build around A, but it's easy to build around.
Yeah, my question is, do you think that this will be a 2 for 4 more than Sneak Attack will be a 2 for 4? Like, which one do you think is going to be played as a 2 for 4 more?
Well, so Sneak Attack is a 2 for 3 and also blocks 2. So I think the comparative downside is bigger. But yeah, I think you're going to get a Sneak Attack off more than you can get Bonds of Ancestry off, for sure, definitely.
All right, so an easier one to read for me. We have Recoils as a ninja attack action at rare. We're looking at the red. It costs 0. It attacks for 3 and blocks for 3. It says combo. If Head Jab was the last attack on this combat chain, this has, when this hits a hero, they put a card from their hand on top of their deck. I have this as a C+. I think this is a fine card. And honestly, a little bit above fine. I really do like what the blue can do with this card. It's a blue that blocks for 3 and has like a very relevant on-hit ability. That being said, now that we just looked at Bonds of Ancestry, like having a red recoil and a couple blue recoils is like, that's a really good sort of finisher for Bonds of Ancestry, right? Because the blue is like super reasonable to have in your deck, so you can block with it, and then you go fetch the red recoil, and now you have that 0 for 7 with a super relevant on-hit effect. Like, yeah, C+ for
You don't get the on-hit though, unfortunately.
Oh, you don't get the on-hit.
No, because you won't get
Head Jab, you're right. So just 0 for 3. Yeah. So not as good, but yeah, I did have this as a C+.
Yeah, I think this is a Benji card to me, to be honest. I mean, you're going to play it in Katsu sometimes if you have a lot of head jabs, and like this is a good finisher, especially if you just have like the attack reaction to push it over. That there's only one attack reaction for Ninja at common or rare, but like that text is pretty huge. This can represent a 0 for roughly 6, which is pretty huge. If we're assigning sort of 3 value of damage to that random card, or that card that the opponent chooses that we see as random. But I think the yellow and blue can be really scary in Benji, and could be like a B minus even. But I'm gonna give us like a C+. I think.
Yeah, you're right. Like in Benji, this card seems extremely annoying to play against.
Yeah, yellow and blue. Yeah, imagine like a blue comes in even with Benji's ability, or yellow without the +1, and it's like, okay, cool, can't block it. Like I'm just taking 2 and losing a card, like that's a big swing.
It's a 0 for 5 on the Benji side, right? Yeah. Because they get the damage in and you lose the card. It's like kind of busted.
Next up, we have Spinning Wheel Kick. This is a card that I'm very excited about, and we just talked about before. So it's a ninja attack action at rare. It costs 1 and attacks for 4 and defense for 2 at red. Attacks for 4. There is a cycle, of course. Combo: if Twin Twisters or Spinning Wheel Kick was the last attack of this combat chain, this has +1 attack, and when this hits, put it on the bottom of its owner's deck. Go again. First question, how relevant is that last line of text put on the bottom of its owner's deck?
Extremely relevant and limited, especially if you're playing pre-release and you're playing sealed. You're going to have people that just put all their cards together and try to fatigue you, and it's like such a good ability. I mean, if this ability doesn't look extremely powerful to you, we can draw attention to a somewhat similar but not as powerful ability, but more powerful ability that was on Dread of Brutality, which is like the most broken limited card ever printed.
But the other thing as well, I think the reason this is so ridiculous is that it puts it back into your deck to Katsu again. Like you just keep putting like Katsu threats back into your deck, and this triggers off Twin Twisters, and it triggers off itself. Like if you played another one,
yeah. So I have this at a B-, which might be a little bit of a low rating for the recursion, but 1 for 4 go again is gonna get. I think 1 for 4 go again might get you up past the C range by itself. So maybe like a B is more in line with where this card should be rated.
Yeah, I mean, it is a rare, so having a lot of these is tough. Obviously, it does trigger off Twin Twisters, which does a leg tap impression as well. Does defend for 2, does cost 1. So I think a B- is like maybe a B is where it could sit if you've got. I think the more Twin Twisters and these cards you have, I think it gets towards B. But I think you're probably right at a B-, and even like the yellow is like relevant. I think the blue is kind of whatever because obviously it's not 0 cost for your Kodachis, but. Even a yellow, because if you can trigger and turn into a 4, there's another breakpoint. And breakpoints are really relevant because of Benji's ability. Like, I think Benji is secretly going to be, I think the thought was like, oh, you're going to play cards every time. But actually, all the time, I think you might play Benji.
All right. So next up, we have Back Heel Kick. This is a ninja attack action. Red, cost 0, attacks for 3, defends for 3, and says combo. If Twin Twisters was the last attack on this combat chain, this has, if Back Heel Kick would gain attack, it instead gains that much. +1. So this makes sense, and you'll see later with Twin Twisters, it can buff the next attack. So it makes a lot of sense as being the follow-up. Nevertheless, I think that this is like kind of a straight up C. I think it's a bit more narrow where it has to be just Twin Twisters, and the payoff is not. I mean, the payoff is good, but you're going from 0 for 3 to 0 for 5, which is really good. I just wonder if Twin Twisters by itself is too narrow. I had C. What did you have, Hayden?
I think the Benji trigger is more relevant, to be honest. Mm-hmm. So I think actually, even if you have Twin Twisters, like Twin Twisters, you give it +1 to Twin Twisters to try and leak the damage to get the buff on your next attack. To make this a 0 for 5 that way, as opposed to the other way. I think sometimes it might be the other way around. I could be wrong on that, but I mean, this defends for 3, which is kind of also. I know I'm harping on about defending for 3 in this set, but I do think it is relevant because, especially for Ninja, like there's not a lot of ways to do it. But at the same time, yeah, like if you just have this by itself and you can't turn on combo, like it's a pretty bad chain ender. I think this is like a C to a C plus in Benji, potentially at red. I think the yellow is pretty trash, and the blue's good. It's a 0 cost that's blue and defense for 3. Next up is Be Like Water. This is a card I alluded to earlier. It's a ninja action attack at common, cost 0. Defense for 2, and at red attacks for 3. Cycle of these. When this hits, you may pay 1 resource. If you do, choose Head Jab, Surging Strike, or Twin Twisters. This gains the chosen name. What are you thinking?
Classic. The one I wanted you to go first with. I think this is a B-. It might be higher though. That's what scares me. Is like the thing is like 0 for 3 itself, very very good. Blocks for 2, not as good. You do have to pay for that on hit, so it is an entire additional resource, which means it's an entire additional card, which is a lot. But if Uprising plus anything, it's at 0 for 3 with Go Again, are just kind of vanilla good. I have this at a B-, but I could definitely be talked up.
I'm not going to talk you up, to be honest. And this is a really hard card to evaluate, to be honest, because I think you're right. It's like, first of all, this is a Head Jab, so I think it's hard to go below like a C ever, right? So at minimum base is a Head Jab, which is good. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it doesn't combo with Head Jab without paying for a 1 and hitting. But then the next kind of step on this is like it's really flexible and versatile. And I think your opponent knowing how to or if to block this is quite difficult at times if they're really trying to keep their cards in their hand. I think my kind of first take on this limited format is that defending is kind of relevant because using your cards in your hand is really difficult, especially if you're a ranger. Like I think a lot of the time you're going to want to play off like 2 and 3 cards, 3 and 4 cards. So defending with the cards can be relevant, and defending this out with your like excess arrow or yellow arrow or blue arrow, whatever, is probably going to be pretty reasonable. And then this becomes, worse than a head jab. So it's really hard to evaluate this card. I think I have it at like a C plus bordering B minus, but honestly, that depends on how the format plays out. And I could see this card going to like a B plus and being like a really highly sought after card to like set up your combo lines. Like it could go either way, honestly.
I could see the same thing. All right,
it's not mask though, which is key. It's not the mask.
All right, so next up we have Deadly Duo. This is a ninja attack action at common. We're looking at the red one. Cost 1, attacks for 3, defends for 2, and it says when this hits, the next attack action card with 2 or less base you play this combat chain gains +2 attack, and it has go again. Hayden, what do you think about this card?
Benji card. This is a Benji card. I think if at red, if you can threaten a 1 for 4 to force the breakpoint, you're threatening a 1 for 6, which is really huge. If you have the yellow or even blue, you're threatening a +2. So at yellow, you're threatening a 1 for 4 with go again. So it's effectively a leg tap for Benji potentially. I think this, Deadly Duo. I mean, look at the picture. It's got Benji in it. It really just tells you. Let's just do it all for you. But I think this is a Benji card and not particularly a Katsu card. And I think it's probably just a solid like C minus. And I think it's a D in Katsu. Like I don't think you want to be playing this card.
I had a C as well.
Easy, done. Descendant Gust Wave. Here's our Gust Wave of the set. It's another ninja attack action at common, defense for 2, at red attacks for 3 and costs 1. It has combo. If Surging Strike was the last attack this combat chain, this costs 1 less to play and has +2. So you're threatening a 0 for 5, right? If this comes off the back of a Surging Strike, that's huge. That's Rising Knee Thrust territory, right? But unlike Rising Knee Thrust, it doesn't defend for 3 and it doesn't cost 0 naturally. So I think this is powerful, obviously with like mask and stuff, and we just talked about like
water.
Like water. Yeah, which is a good way to turn this on as well. I think this is going to be ending up like on average a C. Sometimes it's going to look like a B plus, and sometimes it's going to look like a friggin' D. Like honestly, I think it's going to vary a lot.
I had it as a C plus. I think with like all of the modifiers to, whether it's the mask or be like water, you're going to be able to trigger this, more than if you were jumping through all the hoops you traditionally do when playing a deck like Katsu, in something like Welcome to Wraith. Nevertheless, I think the floor of this card is kind of absolutely trash. So that's one thing. I mean, we talk about the floor being trash, but like 1 for 3 in limited is serviceable because it has go again. If it didn't have go again, I mean, it'd be unplayable. All right.
Here's a tip just for pre-release. Just block like water. Just always block like water. I think it just reduces any ceiling of your opponents. Even if you lose 1 value on the block, I think on average you're going to make up like 2 on value. So,
all right. Next up, we have Head Jab. This is an old one from Welcome to Wraith. It's a ninja attack action common. It's red, costs 0, attacks for 3, blocks for 2, and it simply just says go again. Yeah, Hayden, I know we've been rating a lot of other Head Jab impersonators around that B minus C plus range, but I have it as a C plus. I think it's more appropriately a C in the context. I mean, these are good role players. I think, Uprising taught us we had Head Jab impersonators in Uprising. They were broken. It also was synergistic with hero ability and some other things like Lava Burst. But nevertheless, 0 for 3 go again is definitely where it's a good place to build your foundation. So I have it as a C plus, but I could see it as a C.
I think we have most of these Head Jab sort of effects at a C, like you say. Interesting fact is this was, if not the first card, one of the first cards we saw for Flesh and Blood ever. This was in the Ira deck. One of the first cards we saw. So a little tidbit there. So I think in limited, like if you could have your whole hand be red head jabs, right? Your hand would represent 12 damage on offense, which is reasonable. Obviously, it means that your defensive value is a lot worse. I think in most draft formats, like that is not good enough. I think you want somewhere around like 13 to 14 if you can. I think this format is a little bit less powerful in some regards and a little bit slower. So I think Head Jab has like a little bit more value because playing your cards out is good and threatening sort of on hits because of how many 2 blocks there are. But I still think this is just like a solid C. And yeah, that's it. Next up, we have 1-2 Punch. This is another ninja attack action at common. Cost 0, defense for 3, and at red attacks for 3. Has combo. If Head Jab was the last attack this combat chain, and this has, when this hits a hero, deal 2 damage to them. So Potentially, if you've played Hijab, you're threatening a 0 for 5, but of course, one sort of block turns this into just a 0 for 3, and this does not have Go Again, obviously offset by 3 defense.
Yeah, I'm assuming this is a Benji card, but I had it as a C-, and I was thinking about it more in Katsu, but maybe in Benji it's a C. Hayden, what do you think?
I think it's a C-. I think the yellow and blue like have roles in Benji, and that's going to be cool. Like, there's this whole thing where you kind of, I think there might be this archetype where you kind of draft really high value combo cards and just good cards early, and then you pick up all these kind of like stragglers of like yellows and blues to make this like strong Benji deck and just kind of like take advantage of the natural cycle of the draft, which is quite cool. But I don't think this changes this from being like a C-.
Yeah, it's a funny strategy because I find that like a lot of players in Flesh and Blood tend to prioritize like all their power cards in pack 1 and 2 and actually start picking up blues in pack 3 anyway. So I think you like follow that cycle. Maybe if you reversed it and you started taking, I don't know, but the reds still
people
go
don't
pack
pick the yellows,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly. The reds go pack 3 anyway as well.
I think one thing I do just want to caution while we talk about cards like 1-2 Punch and Benji is like, don't focus too much on that ability. The most important ability of Benji is the +1 attack. Because if you can make up like, first of all, if you make up 3 damage on that effect, you've already back to value. And then all of a sudden you get to 4 and 5, you're ahead of value, you're doing a bad IRA impression, and then of course you also have the ability to have this like evasion for late game and just on some random turns.
All right, so next up we have Surging Strike. This is a ninja attack action at red. It costs 2, attacks for 5, blocks for 2, and says Go Again. It's another combo starter. I have it as B-, but maybe Surging Strike is just straight up B. I feel like Surging Strike was closer to a B and like Welcome to Wraith potentially because you've had a follow up of Whelming Gustwave, which drew you a card. That being said, a B- is probably more appropriate. And yeah, well, I'll be surprised. You at C? Are you a C plus for this or C?
I'm at like C+. I think the combo starters are slightly worse in the set because of Mask and some of the cost structure of the cards. So like at worst, right, at red, 2-card hand this is a 2 for 6. And with a 3-card hand, you're threatening, with the Gust Wave, you're threatening like a 3-card hand for 9 damage. That's pretty good. That's on rates where you want to be. But I honestly think like because of how cracked Bonds of Ancestry potentially is, people are going to rate this a lot higher than they probably should. And I think I'm okay with just like letting this card go to people often. Mm-hmm. So I have this like a C+, and I don't think I can really be talked up to higher, to be honest. But, if you do have a lot of bonds or you open to bonds and you decided to take them and you're trying to force the archetype, this becomes a lot more important. Next up is Twin Twisters, another reprint that we see here. When was this printed? Was this in Crucible of War? I think it was.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those ninja cards that was never played. So.
Everfest. So this is a ninja attack action at common. It costs 1, defense for 2, and at red attacks for 3. It is a cycle, and it says choose one. Twin Twisters has when this hits your next attack, this combat chain gains +1, or Twin Twisters has +1 attack, Go Again. So we talked about this a little bit before with alluding to the setup on what's the next card in the cycle called that we talked about? It's called Deadly Duo. Is that right?
Could be.
No, it's not. It's I can't remember what the card was called. We talked about it earlier. Sorry. But I think Twin Twisters is at worst a leg tap, and leg tap's good. So at red, I think this is a C+, and it's a C at yellow and a D at blue, because you don't want cost blues.
Exact same grade I had was C+.
Easy.
All right. Before we head into Ranger, I don't have an image for it, but I want to talk about the Ranger weapon because it is new. It's Barbed Castaway, and it says, once per turn instant, 1 resource, you may put an arrow card from your hand face up into your arsenal, and also has once per turn instant, you may turn a face up arrow in your arsenal. Sorry, a face down arrow in your arsenal face up if you do put an aim counter on it. Just really important to keep in mind as we look at some of these Ranger cards.
It's really important to keep in mind. Also, Backheel Kick is the name of that ninja card.
There it is. All right. So first one we have here is Crow's Nest. This is a Ranger equipment quiver. It's a token. It's Azalea specialization. It says whenever an arrow is put face up into your arsenal from your deck, you may pay 1 resource if you do put an aim counter on it. Hey, and this is a token, so it's kind of a free roll, but what do you think?
I think this is really important to Azalea. I think, aim counters are clearly important, and the ability to, pay this resource, and you're going to be activating this a lot with Azalea is my feeling.
Yeah, so the thing about these cards like this, and as well as I'll just show the next one, which is Driftwood Quiver, Riptide Specialization Instant, Driftwood Quiver, put a card from your arsenal on the bottom of your deck. They're just complete free rolls. Like, you're just going to play them in these heroes. It's just important to highlight, as they are very new to Flesh and Blood. The Quiver is the first time this is being introduced is in Outsiders. So I think that these are, for what it's worth, they're A's. They don't compete with anything. You would always play them.
Well, they might. So I just want to caveat.
The Majestics and the Legendaries.
Yeah. I think you're basically always going to play Crow's Nest, even if you open any of the other quivers, because I think you need the ability to get the aim counter on your arrows. Whereas Riptide does that a lot better with the bow, so with the Barbed Castaway. Whereas Driftwood Quiver, on the other hand, I think that does compete with if you open any of the other quivers, because I honestly think like this is just a get out of jail free card once per game. If you Arsenal kind of the wrong card, and I think that's it. Whereas like I say, Crow's Nest, I think you basically have to play that card.
Yeah, I had Crow's Nest rated significantly higher than Driftwood Quiver.
Not that they compete, but if they did. Cool, let's get into the cards. First up for Ranger is Wayfinder's Crest. This is a Ranger equipment head. Defends for 1, has Blade Break, and says when you defend with Wayfinder's Crest, look at the top card of target hero's deck. So, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind, right, Brendan, is Azalea, and having a little peek before you next turn when you might want to Azalea ability to dominate an arrow. I mean, just getting information isn't terrible on like what your opponent's going to have in next turn in their hand, so it's not terrible. But this is Iron Rot Helm with a little bit of upside. Where do you see this though? I'll throw my grade out first. I think it's hard to put equipment below the B range that defends, that has Blade Break. So I'm going to give this like a solid B, I think. I think I brought my grades up all like half a grade on equipment, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we always run into this sort of issue when rating equipment because they compete with so little. But I do think that for me, I had this at like a C+. I know that the rating potentially goes up because in context of what it competes with, but the effect in of itself, like it's just Iron Rod, and I think that ability is only really relevant in Azalea. Mind you, I think it's good in Azalea, but still, I don't think this is like something that you're crazy excited to have rather than another headpiece.
Iron Rot is relevant in this format though because of the breakpoints that I've been talking about through this kind of set review. You know, we've seen a few of them already with like the on-hit effects, especially if Spider's Bite's involved, but also like the 4 breakpoints for things like Benji and stuff. So often you can turn this into a defend for 2. I honestly just think that like if we're comparing this to other cards in the kind of like C+ range, I think this is better than most of those cards as a comparative standpoint. Yeah, and I think that's why I'm like all these Blade Break equipment I have around a B sort of range. And there's some others that have some relevant text as well.
All right, so next up we have Boulder Trap. This is a Ranger defense reaction trap at rare. It's a yellow, it costs 0, it blocks for 3, and it says when this defends an attack with attack greater than its base, put a -1 counter on equipment the attacking hero controls. Hayden?
Yeah, important to note, no cycles for these traps, so this is only at yellow. I mean, it's an on-rate yellow. D-reacts are good in the set because of the fact, again, you know, things like Spider's Bite, the fact of like reactions, Riptide, because you can turn into a 0 for 4 with Riptide if you can trigger this effect, and then you can turn to a 0 for 5 if you put in a -1 counter to deny a Blade Break. All that said, those are all conditional things. I think it's like a C+ probably.
Okay, interesting. So I had a C+ as well, but tell me if you agree with this. I wrote this as a caveat. All traps get a letter grade higher in Riptide.
So the problem is like they have to be triggering. I think this one is pretty easy to trigger because it's attack greater than its base attack. So yeah, maybe it's like half a grade to a grade higher in Riptide because of, like you say, that damage it's worth. And yeah, this one is one of the easy ones to trigger. You know, we talk about sneak attack, twin twisters, all these combo cards. Like this one is easier to trigger. Might be right. Yeah. Next up, we have Pendulum Trap. So another of these yellow cycle of traps, Ranger defense reaction traps, defends for 3, costs 0, and says when this defends and the attacking hero has played or activated a reaction this chain link, put the top 2 cards of their deck into their graveyard.
You want to hear my rating? This is a D. Yeah, like it's hard to like. I guess in Riptide, like if you're getting the 0 for 4 out of this, that's good. But other than that, like the ability kind of sucks. And like Azuri is the only one I think where this is like, I don't know,
a 0 for 4.
Yeah, a 0 for 4. Other than that, like I think this card is actually like pretty bad. But I could be wrong. I mean, defense reactions can be sort of a finicky thing in terms of like how they actually impact the format.
Yeah, mono pendulum trap, Riptide fatigue.
Yeah, fatigue.
With no weapon. Good luck. I agree. I think this is a D, maybe a C in Riptide at best. Next up is Tarpit Trap. This is another Ranger defense reaction trap. Cost 0 at yellow and defense for 3. Rare again, and says when this defends an attack action with go again, the next time an attack action card hits this turn, effects do not trigger. Now, Brendan, I think this one is, again, if not easier than the plus attack one to trigger, around the same. But is the text as relevant?
Yeah, that's the question. So I think this is best against Ninja, actually. It's actually like really good against Ninja, I think. So I have it as like a C- in general, but I think that if I had this in my sideboard, I'd be taking it up against every Katsu I played, probably Benji.
Yeah, I might give it like a sideboard grade, honestly, like B-. Like this card can really overperform, I think. Like especially in Riptide, this could just be a straight up B against all the ninjas.
Yeah.
I think I've landed on like a C+ as a blanket Ranger grade, but yeah.
So one thing to keep in mind is I'm pretty sure with the mask, you have to activate that like before you play the card. So it like kind of telegraphs like the future combo line. So if you have this, it really upsets it and they have to invest into that turn. And this just like immediately shuts it down. So yeah, something to keep in mind. I think that against something like Katsu or against just combo cards in general, this card is actually pretty good.
Yes, good point. You mask him in your faces, you do have to trigger before because this is the next card you play. So definitely worth noting.
All right, next up we have Fletch a Red Tail. Really interesting cycle, by the way. First time we ever had this like multicolored cycle that say different like literal text. But it's a Ranger non-attack action at rare, or it's red, cost 1, defense for 2. Says your next arrow attack this turn gains +4 attack. If it has an aim counter on it, it gains red cards have -1 defense while defending this. Go again. So I think this card is good, to be honest. I think it's pretty good in Azalea. I don't know if like the aim counter shenanigans is like it's cute. It might work. But I would just play this card as like a 1 for 4 with go again in a lot of my Azalea decks. Because if you ever played Arcane Rising Limited, which Azalea was a part of, these non-attack action pumps are actually so important to you winning the game.
I also think it's super important to Riptide. Like you play this from hand, you trigger Riptide's ability, you put your arrow in Arsenal. You then use so that's one resource. You use your next resource to Barbed Castaways, flip it up, add an aim counter, and then you pay 1 to play that arrow. And you're playing a 2-card hand, a 3-card hand for like effective, like on face value, it's probably going to be 10, but the effective with the Fletcher Red Tail effect could be like 11 or 12 because of what you're giving minus. I do actually think that text is somewhat relevant, although I agree it's not, it's not crazy relevant. The most important thing is this is a 1 for 4. But I think this is actually, if not, I don't know. It's equally as important, I think, for both Rangers, but the card is really good. Like I just have this as like a solid B. I think this card is good.
Definitely. I had B-, but I do think it's a solid B. Like the more I look back at like old Ranger formats, like even Tales of Aria, like Overload was it Overload? Whatever one, the pump that it was busted. Like that card was so freaking good in the Go Tall Ice Azalea. So I do think it's a solid B, for sure.
So next up we have Fletcher Yellowtail, which is the exact same, except that the text says if yellow cards have -1 while defending, and it gives +3 instead of +4, and of course is a yellow line. I think the interesting thing about the cycle that I didn't talk about just before is I think this one cost is effectively free. Like I don't think you have to care about this one cost because of the line I just talked about with Riptide, but also Azalea is like pretty similar, I think. With Barbed Castaway to pay for it, then the arrow attack itself, and then this card. Also, I think 0-cost arrows are really powerful because of the ability of like aim counters and stuff as well. I think this is like a B-. I think this is like a slight step down, but again, I want these cards in my deck.
It's so funny. I put a D for this, but like I heavily regret it. I was gonna be honest, like I could lie. I could lie, put a D. Yeah, I just figured, like the red was just strictly better, like your opponent. I guess like the yellow cards, like do want to block with the most, which I didn't really consider. Like, because if your opponent has red, yellow, and blue cards, they probably want to block with the yellow cards the most because the blues are better at pitching and the reds are better at attacking. So it's definitely, it's better than the blue one, I think. But yeah, I did put a D, so yeah, my fault.
I might be overrating this as B-. It might actually be a full grade down. It might be like a C, as opposed to like B for red, C for yellow, or C+. But I do think like you want pumps in both the ranges. And like I say, I think the one resource, particularly in Riptide, doesn't mean anything. It's a bit more relevant in Azalea, but we might be somewhere in between. I definitely don't think it's a D though.
Yeah, so next up we have Fletcher the Blue Tail. So same thing, but -1 attack or -1 defense to blue cards that are defending. I just want to put this one at like the C- range then.
Yeah, I initially had this as a C plus, but I think I'm coming down like a grade on yellow and blue, so I'd have this at like a C. I mean, it's a really relevant blue that like the thing I think you want to be able to do with your blues in the set is either block for 3 or be able to be played out when you have to keep your whole hand. Like if your opponent doesn't attack or they take a turn off, or you don't want to get stuck with cards that you can't use. Like giving yourself an effective IP penalty is terrible, right? I know we've talked about this before, Brendan. And I think either defends a 3 or does something where you can just play it and get a slight buff, and this does it. So it's probably just a solid role-playing blue at like a C.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next up we have Lace with Blood Rot. So keeping on this Ranger non-attack action theme, this is a 0 cost at rare. This only comes in red, so there's no cycles to this card. It defends for 2 and says your next arrow attack this turn gains +3 attack, and when this hits a hero, create a Blood Rot Pox token under their control. Nailed the Blood Rot Pox thing there. I don't know, Brendan, what do you think?
So I had B+, but I think in Azalea, this is an A- to an A. Like, I think in Azalea, I just really, really want these. Because Azalea is dominating arrows, right? So they're going to be hitting. So it's like consistently 0 for 5, which makes it super good.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Spike with Frailty, Spike with Blood Rot, all these things, and the kind of value of like a potential 1 for 5. This represents a potential 0 for 5. In Azalea, I think you're right. I think I got this B+ and an A to an A- in Azalea. I agree. This card is like, this is the sort of card I want to first pick, I think.
Next, we have Lace with Frailty. This is a Ranger non-attack action at rare. We're looking at the red one, cost 0, defense for 2. It says your next arrow attack this turn gains +3, and when this hits a hero, create a Frailty token under their control. Go again. So for this one, I have B-, but I would rate it higher against something like Katsu and Benji because it is so effective against the Kodachis. But again, this is going to be, this is kind of on brand with us. Is like, it's the same effect as the Blood Art one, but it's a Frailty token, so it's just worse.
Yep. Important to note, no cycle again for these. Like all the Lace with cards don't have cycles. All these token makers. I have this at like a B-. I think this can represent 0 for 4, 0 for 5 in some matchups, and that's really good. I do want to go back to the fact that I think against Ninja and Assassin, this is threatening almost always 0 for 5 because either 2 Kodachi hits or the Spider's Bite not having an attack, which means that then when it comes in, you don't get the on-hit effect of getting minus to your attacks, or even if they play a card from Arsenal, which they're potentially going to want to. So I do think these cards the ceiling on them is really high. Like you could be threatening like 0 for 6 on these, and that's just starting to get crazy. So I mean, I could also see all of these cycles of Lace with and Spike with and all that going up like a full grade to half a grade.
Yeah, my biggest caveat is I could see us being slightly wrong about Frailty's relation and power level to Blood Rot, and they could actually be almost identical.
Potentially, that's kind of what like I'm angling towards, is that I think Frailty is actually often close in value, but it's just it's easier for your opponent to potentially play around and stuff, right? It's like, oh, I could attack with the Kodachi, or I could just like save that resource for this other attack that I was thinking about Arsling instead or something.
Yeah.
Or I block with this card instead. Like there's ways to play around it.
And ain't nobody playing for Blood Rot in limited, and if they do, it's effectively 3 red because it takes almost the entire card, I guess. For
What a card.
Yeah,
their hand sucked, and they haven't blocked with that card. So next up, we have Lace with Inertia. This is the third in this Lace with cycle. Obviously, it's all the same thing, so I'm not going to read it. It gives +3, and if it hits, it creates an Inertia token. I think this is the worst, but again, buffs are really important, and these are the kind of like above average kind of role players you want. So I think this is like a C+.
Yeah, I had it as a C, and I'd probably do B- in Azalea. Again, in Azalea, I just want a lot of these effects. All right, next up we have Falcon Wing. This is a Ranger attack action. It's an arrow. It's a common. We're looking at the red, cost 0, attacks for 3, defense for 3. It says if Falcon Wing has an aim counter on it, it has +1. Go again. Yep. So for me, this is a B, a Ranger card that's a 0 for 3. Go again. I think that's really, really good, especially when it blocks for 3. The fact that it can get the +1 as a potential upside if you have additional resources, great. I think this is like absolutely the kind of card I want to be filling some of my my Ranger decks with.
Yeah, so you have this as a B?
Yeah, at a B.
I think the go again's relevant, but I have this at a C.
Mm-hmm.
And I could maybe go up to like a C+, but I at red, but I think this is like just a role player. Like I think I'm more interested in the pumps, to be honest, because like playing that non-attack action to trigger like Riptide's ability so you can then get the arrow into Arsenal, or playing the non-attack action to go tall for like Dominate or on-hit effects in Azalea, like because we're going to talk about some arrows that have really relevant on-hit effects, I think is a lot more enticing to me. Playing like your full 5-card hands, because it's important to remember, like if you use your Barb Castaway to load an arrow, what other way do you have to get another arrow into your arsenal afterwards? It's a once per turn instance, so it needs to be like Riptide's ability, or it needs to be there's no reload in this set, so it can be a bit more difficult, I think. So I think the arrows are a bit more of a premium, but I think the red is like a really important role player. I mean, I think in Riptide this is better than in Azalea though.
Yeah, you could be right. I could be not correctly sort of accounting for how hard it is to play the second arrow after you play with Go again.
But playing like a really good attack after this,
Yeah,
any of the generic attacks is still solid, right?
So yeah, there's some good generic attacks too.
Last thing just quick want to say is that if you don't have the aim counter, it's a 0 for 3, and you do have to basically always pay 1 resource for that. So it's a 1 for 4 in a lot of ways with Go again, not a 0 for 4.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Infecting Shot. This is a ranger attack action arrow attack. Defends for 3 and costs 1, and at red it attacks for 5. It is a cycle. It says if Infecting Shot has an aim counter on it, has +1 attack, and when this hits a hero, create a Blood Rot Pox token under their control. Is this just maybe the best arrow?
I think so. Well, is the other one an arrow? I gotta go see. It's a hybrid card. The one we freaked out about.
Oh, Death Touch?
Death Touch, yeah. Is that an arrow?
Not an arrow.
Okay, no. But it has to be played from Arsenal. It's like a pseudo arrow. But yeah, I think this is the best arrow in that case. I have this as a B+.
Yeah, I think I'm probably with you. I think I had B down, but I think I'm probably like a B to B+ for red, and then like a B- C+ for yellow. And blue is also serviceable because you can turn it into a breakpoint with the aim counter, which is really relevant. I think one thing I really want people to understand is like the cost structure of what this is going to look like for your rangers. So like if you play this in, give me a weird look there.
Oh no, I'm just thinking that this is a freaking 2 for 8 that blocks for 3, like 6, 7, 8, yeah. With the Blood Rot Pox.
Yeah, so I mean, you can even I mean, because of resource base, right? So 1 to load, 1 to quiver to get the aim counter, and then 1 to pay for it.
I mean, we know that. We've heard this.
2 card 9.
2 card 9. Oh my god! So
it threatens 2 card 9, right? Which is 2 card 8. You are right.
Yeah, 2 card 8. I feel like this is the Aether Ice Fiend close to of this set. It's not quite. Obviously, Aether Ice Fiend is a disruptive card. It's wildly different, but the value of this card is freaking ridiculous. Like this is 2 card 8. A lot.
Threatening 2 card 8.
Yeah, which threatening 2 card 8, yeah.
And blocking, like having 2/3 blocks in hand is not that easy in this set. So if you can always get the aim counter on this cover for 6, like it is really hard to deal with.
Yeah, this card's a common too. Yeah, I think this could be an A-. It's ridiculous.
I mean, the red is really good, but also the yellow is really solid. Like this is, if I'm inclined to think that range is good in the set, Infecting Shot's the sort of card that I'm like wanting to first pick in arrows.
Yeah, next we have Murkmire. Oh my god, what is his name? Murkmire Grapnel. It's a ranger attack action. It's an arrow. It's a common. Look at the red one, cost 0, attacks for 4, blocks for 3. It says if Murkmire Grapnel has an aim counter, gets +1. Damage that would be dealt by Murkmire Grapnel can't be prevented. So this is effectively a 0 for 4, the blocks of 3 that you can dump an extra resource in to be a 0 for 5. I think the ability is like pretty irrelevant, but honestly, it could be there. Like if we're looking at something like draft, like there could be an archetype where people just prioritize those kind of effects and higher blocking cards, and this is relevant. But I think this is like a 0 for 4, the blocks of 3 is pretty good, and then also just like being able to dump the additional resource into it. So let me see what grade I had. Sorry, I have to scroll down. So I had a C+.
Yeah, damage prevention, those cards aren't unplayable. So the text isn't completely irrelevant. I think this is better than like the Go Again arrow, for instance, just like as a comparison, or around the same, because
I think it is. Yeah,
because like 0 for like the cost structure again, just going back to it, it's really, that's why I say the quiver is so important for Azalea. You're going to do this like more often than not, I think, be putting these aim counters on. So I have this like a C+ at red, I think C to C+, and like even the blue arrow, it's like it blocks for 3 and can be an attack for what's that for 3? Like it's not terrible. Except we have Sedation Shot. This is a ranger attack action arrow. Costs 1, defense for 3, and red attacks for 5. And says if Sedation Shot has an aim counter, it has +1, and when this hits a hero, create an inertia token under their control. So it's the same as the one we talked about with Infecting Shot, but for inertia tokens.
Yeah, I have C+.
I have this as a C. I think it's the worst of the 3 of these cycle again that generate tokens, but a 1 for 6 is good. Like it's a good arrow. So I could be talked up to C+ for red, but I think majority of them are just a C. The worst of the 3, right?
Yeah. Well, debatably, maybe Skybound Shot is worse. So we're looking at Skybound Shot now. Ranger, attack, action. It's an arrow. It's common. We're looking at the red, cost 1, attacks for 5, blocks for 3, and just says if Skybound Shot has an aim counter, it gains +1. So in line with me rating the worst ones of the last cycle at C+, I have this just a C.
Yeah. I think if sedation shot's a C+, then this is just a C. But power is good. Like, you want big numbers in that bottom left hand corner, and Skybound Shot is going to be like a mid, like especially at red, like a mid to late pick that you're gonna be happy to see.
Honestly, the more I look at these cards, the more I'm convinced that if I'm anywhere near playing, like anywhere close to playing an Azalea deck, I want as many pumps as possible because there is a shitload of arrows for me to pick up, and these are very high statted arrows, and it's going to be really easy to dominate and kill people. I feel like I'm just thinking back to a format like Tales of Aria where you could have those really go tall decks, and I thought they were very underrated.
Pumps are good, man. The pumps are really good. Like, I'm rating them really highly. Let's talk about stated ranger attacks. Spire Sniping is the next ranger attack action arrow at common. It costs 1, defense of 3, and it red attacks for 5. When Spire Spinning is put or turned face up in an arsenal, look at the top 2 cards of your deck and put them back in any order. I mean, I think in Azalea, this is probably on rate with Skybound Shot. It's probably worth about +1, but otherwise I think it's the worst of these 1-cost arrows, and I think it's probably like a C.
Interesting. I think this card is good in Azalea. Like, I think it's a C for sure, but then I think in Azalea it's like pretty freaking good, because if I really need my Azalea to hit, right, let's say I invest like 2 non-attack actions into pumping, and I really need this dominated arrow to be a hit, and I don't want to go off the top of my deck, and I don't want to get the second cycle because maybe the ninjas are too fast. Like, this card allows me to do that via loading with the token bow that's in this set. Look at the top 2 cards, then activating Azalea, and boom, I've got my dominated arrow. So this seems like a card I would want.
I agree, but then why is the red better? Like, then the blue is just the same thing, right? Because you're going to tuck it to the bottom anyway.
True.
So
right.
I just think it's hard to get above like a C+, I think, because like the stats and the effect is relevant, but the stats are never going to be above what they are at attack for 5. This is you, I think.
Oh yeah. So next up we have Widowmaker, Ranger, attack action arrow. It's a common. We're looking at the red one, cost 1, attacks for 4, blocks for 3. It says defense reactions can't be played the Widowmaker's chain link. And it says if Widowmaker is defended by fewer than 2 cards, it has +3 attack. Important to note that does include equipment cards. So I think this card is way better in limited than it is in constructed. And I have this as at a B due to the scarcity of equipment and the sort of the consistency, or your opponent will need to block this with 2 cards. I think you're just getting way too much value. You can't just.
The only equipment that blocks in the set that has a defensive value is blade break equipment. So you are like, if they're going to use equipment, you're really happy if you get a card plus equipment on this. Defense reactions can't be played. That's not irrelevant. The stats on this though, like, so if you're threatening a 1 for 7, like a 1 card for 7, or even because of you've pumped it or whatever, like, pumps are really bad on this, and that's what I think brings us down for me, because I think the pumps are really relevant and they're not good on this. Obviously, and then like even dominate with Azalea isn't particularly good if your opponent still has blade break equipment left. So I find this, honestly, I'm like a whole grade lower than you. I'm like a C to like a C- on this card. I do think that like text line is relevant of like if they block with fewer than 2 cards, but then they just block with 2 cards and their pumps aren't good. And what have you done with your turn? I think like there's no way to like enhance this beyond, which I think is kind of the challenge with this card. Yeah,
I could see that for sure. It seems like a really good supporting blue as well.
That's true. Around that for sure. I think blue might be the best of the color, to be honest. Last 2 cards. Next up, we have Withering Shot. This is a ranger attack action arrow. Costs 1, defense for 3, red attacks for 5. And says if Withering Shot has an aim counter on it, it has +1 attack. And when this hits a hero, create a frailty token under the control. So this is the 3rd of these shot cycles that we've seen. Same as with the other heroes. I mean, this is the 2nd best one. It's not quite Blood Rot Pox, but I think the more and more we talk about it, it's really close, especially against, obviously, in the mirror against rangers, like it is worse, right? So, I mean, yes, it hits their ranger attack, so it'll be a 0 for 4 sort of minimum. But it's not 0 for 5 like Blood Rot Pox. I have this at a B-, I think.
I had a C+, but yeah, I think that you're right. Like in the ranger mirror, inertia is much better than frailty, but frailty against ninja is super good. I think that it does make me quite hopeful for the set, because there is a lot of sort of push and pull, and there isn't like this is strictly better than the other option.
Yeah.
All right, so on to Assassin Ninja Hybrid. We start out with the equipment. This is Mask of Shifting Perspectives. An Assassin Ninja equipment head at common, defense for 1. It says attack reaction. Destroy Mask of Shifting Perspectives. Whenever a dagger hits this turn, you may put a card from your hand on the bottom of your deck. If you do, draw a card, and it has Blade Rake. Hayden?
Again, another headpiece, right?
Yep.
We're going to be talking about quite a few of them before we end as well. I think this is almost always, in the worst case, a cycle, and cycling is good. Obviously, the dagger has to hit, but you're going to be hitting with daggers. I kind of compare it to the Ranger one. I think the effect is slightly better, but still not. I think Blade Break is going to be the most important part of this. So I have this at a B as well.
Yep, I had C+, but equipment is just infinitely hard to rate.
Next up, we have Blade Cuff. This is, again, Assassin Ninja equipment, arms, Blade Break, defense for 1, and has action. 2 resources, destroy Blade Cuff. Your daggers gain +1 this turn. Go again. I think this is the same thing, but I think the arm slot is a lot less competitive. So, there's a lot less competitive for slots. You're going to want arm equipment. There's less of them than there is head slots. And also, this effect is not irrelevant, to be honest.
It's pretty good, to be honest. When you have the pop-off turn, if you have the inkling of an extra blue in that hand, which I know it might not be the pop-off turn if you have the extra blue, but still, this is it's helping you go over the top, right? Because I think there's a big difference between turns where you do an average amount of damage and then turns where you do an above average amount of damage because you end up stripping your opponent's entire hand and maybe doing damage over the top of that, and then you sort of lock them out via tempo.
It is an action. There's one thing to know. I think if this is instant, I'd be a little higher on this card. And you do have to have the 2 resources to sink into it for 2 damage, which, does kind of incentivize your opponent to start to block these daggers. But all those things said, again, arm equipment important. I think I have this at B+.
I think it's good tempo, right? You can use this on an off turn, to help you push some damage if you do draw kind of a poopy hand.
I think 80% of the time, though, you're going to be using this for Blade Break.
Yeah. I had this as a C+B.
Yeah. I think it is. Again, I just want to point out arm slot is a lot less competitive, and you do want an arm slot. So I think that's the reason I have a half grade higher.
Yeah. So next up we have Bleed Out. This is an Assassin/Ninja attack action at rare. We're looking at the red, cost 2, attacks for 4, defense for 2. It says Bleed Out costs X resource points less to play, where X is the total damage you've dealt with daggers this combat chain. Hayden.
I don't know what it is about reduction of resource cost and cheating cards. It gets me really excited downstairs, Brendan.
Yeah, I think this. Oh gosh.
but what I will say is actually once I kind of reflect and think about it a bit more, it's not that good.
Really?
Because okay, so I think at best, right? So if you can't attack, so in Assassin, for instance, if you can get through your Spider's Bite, which sometimes your opponent is honestly incentivized to defend anyway, then you can't actually attack with this. If you don't get the Spider's Bite through, even if you do, then you're looking at a 2-card hand that's worth 5, maybe 6 because of the negative debuff. In Ninja, it looks better, right? Because it's okay, well, you probably get in 1 to 2 Kodachis. Yeah, that's true. But then also, I think that cost structure is a little bit awkward. I think a lot of the time you're going to be attacking with 1 Kodachi because there's a lot of 1 and 2 cost cards. And sometimes you want back-to-back 1 cost, or sometimes you want to play the 2 cost. So 1 Kodachi is going to be more common, I think. So I honestly think yes, if this is a 1 for 4 with Go Again, then it's the worst leg tap in the deck if you're Ninja. I think this is a C to maybe C+. And
okay,
I honestly think in some Assassins, this is a D to D-.
Oh, okay, we got it. So Assassin, I don't want to worry about Assassin, but I think in Ninja, this is an A- B+. And this is the hill we're going to die on, because I think that so this is going to be pretty consistent. The total damage you've dealt with daggers is combat chain. So I think it's pretty easy with Kodachis to do 2 damage with this, and it's a 0 for 4. 0 for 4 Go Again. This reminds me a lot of Blaze Headlong. It's a little bit harder to pull off than Blaze Headlong because Blaze Headlong was just the red before, but your opponent is not going to play around this. They literally can't. If they're blocking a Kodachi, they were already going to block it anyway. So I think that Kodachis and Limited, I don't think they get blocked a lot because you're always trading down. It's pretty tough. They usually don't block until they're literally dying and then losing the game. So I think it's going to be very, very often that this is a 0 for 4 Go Again, which is freaking busted. It's insane. And the fact that this is still playable if you don't hit with the daggers, you can still use it, and it's a freaking leg tap. I mean, this will be my card of the set. I think this card's busted.
Oh, I think you're so wrong. The problem with I agree. You're not going to trade down Kodachis, and you're probably going to hit with both Kodachis. The problem with that causes is like it's gonna be so hard for you to find hands where I think the cost structure of the ninja cards is gonna start to cause a little bit of issues. I think the best case scenario is that you have a 3-card hand with this, another leg tap and a blue, right? So now you're threatening like 10 damage off your 3 cards. That is slightly above rate, and that is good. And that is like, I think, best case scenario. That's really hard for me to start to give this card like an A. I think I could be talked up into Ninja to like maybe a B minus, but like in some hands you're just gonna be like, well, I just want it, like it's not Blaze Headlong. I can't just keep a 1-card hand and come with this. I can't keep 2 like a 0 cost and like a head jab in this. Like it doesn't work. Like I need the blue to be able to make this work. I think this card is a lot more awkward than Blaze Headlong, and I think in Ninja, I think it is at its best. I think in Assassin, this is going to cause some issues for people. And like, if you have to pay the full 2 resources for this, yeah, it's go again. Like, maybe it's relevant. You like play this into something like a Spring Load for a 3-card hand for like 9, which is on rate. But I'm not that excited about it, and it blocks for 2. I'm really not convinced.
Yeah, so the only caveat I would give to my grade is cost structure, because you really can't, it's hard to predict like what that's like until you play with the set like a few times. Like I would call back to Uprising, where we rated Lava Burst and Red Hot significantly differently, and we had played with the cards. That was the difference, right? I had played with the cards. I had known that like you never have 2 resources to cast a Red Hot, right? The zero resources just infinitely better. It doesn't even, like, the value on Red Hot could be ridiculous high. You're just never going to have that kind of those kind of resources when you're on the Rupture. So it could be a thing, right? Like I haven't played with the cards enough, by that I mean at all, to know if, attacking with 2 Kodachis is going to facilitate a playable combat line out of Ninja ever, But I do think that if you can do it, it's Blaze Headlong. I do.
Yeah, it's not, but okay. What's your final grade on Bleed Out across? Do you want to give it separate grades for Ninja versus everything else?
Yeah, I don't think it's good in Assassin. Like, I think it's like a C, but I think in Ninja, I would go B plus, A minus.
Yeah, I'm gonna go C in Assassin and like B, C plus. Maybe you've took me to a B minus, maybe.
No, stay on that C plus. Keep that energy. Let's go.
All right, done. Next up, we have Hurl. This is a Assassin Ninja attack action. At rare, it costs 0 attacks for 3. It's important to note. So, did these cards do have cycles, right? Yeah, they do. So we're looking at the red one here. Attacks for 3, defense for 2. As an additional cost to play Hurl, you may pay 1 resource. When you do, it gains, when this attacks, target dagger you control deals 1 damage to target hero. If damage is dealt this way, the dagger has hit, destroy the dagger. So, I mean, kind of says it in the name, right? If you, as an additional cost to play it, you can pay a resource. If you do, that dagger is going to be thrown at your opponent, and it's going to attempt to deal 1 damage, and you're going to destroy that dagger no matter what. The card has go again, which is relevant. So, this is a head jab at worst at red, which is cool, and it has some potential reach in the late game. So I think this is like at red is like a, I'd put it on par with head jab. I think it's like a C, the C plus.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it's a May is like, it's fine. I think it's a C.
I'll be trash if it wasn't May.
Yeah.
I think the yellow and blues are pretty bad though. Like they block 2 and.
All right, next up we have Plunge. This is an Assassin Ninja attack action at common, red, 1 cost, attacks for 3, defense for 2. It says, when this hits, your next dagger attack this turn gains +1. Go again. So, is this pretty consistently a 1 for 5? Like, 1 for 4? And like, that's like a best case scenario for this card?
It's pretty consistently a 1 for 3 with go again, I think. And best case scenario is it's 1 for 4. If your opponent wants to let you turn it into that. But the problem is like you don't really want to attack with your daggers after your attacks. You want to attack with them first, is my big problem with this card. And then if it's just a 1 for 3 with go again, this card sucks. Like it's way worse than head jab. Like I think this is like a C minus to D. I'm really not excited about this card.
Yeah, C minus for me as well. I think it's like forecasting power is just not as good, right? You attack with this first, and then you just tell your opponent that the daggers, you're priced into attacking with the daggers. You need to get the value, and your opponent knows exactly how much is coming.
Yeah, that's very true. And also it's trash in Assassin because you want to attack first with the Spider's Bite to get the potential relevant on-hit effect. Next up is Short and Sharp. Again, Assassin/Ninja attack reaction. It costs 1, defense for 2. And we're looking at the red one, which says choose 1. Target dagger attack gets +3 attack. Or target attack action card with 2 or less base attack gains +3. I mean, I think obviously this is a cycle, so yellow is +2 and blue is +1. I think this card is going to be relevant in all colors, just thanks to breakpoints and on-hit effects, and I think you're going to want some number of these. I mean, this is a lot less exciting than the attack actions in Assassin, but you can, it doesn't have the stealth sort of like need where you have to have a covered stealth. You can target your dagger as well, which is obviously great. So you can push through like spider effects, or you can just kill people like a la Razor Reflex and Welcome to Wraith. And the target attack action with like 2 or less base attack is like really relevant for like Benji and stuff as well. But I think that like that last line of text is like a little bit awkward. You can't target like your big attacks or anything like that.
So Benji is, I think, like the best use case for this. I don't know. I feel like this card kind of sucks. I just remember playing Welcome to Wraith, and it's like, if you ever Razor Reflex your dagger, it was terrible, right? Like that's not the best use case for it unless you're like closing out the game. So I don't know, it just feels a bit narrow, but maybe it's good. It's good in Benji.
I mean, I think because of the number of like on-hit effects and assassin and stuff, like attack reactions are really important. I actually honestly think the red, I had it a B-. It might be more like a C+. I might be overrating this because I do think it is the worst of the attack reaction. So it's probably more like a C+. And then the others like a yellow, probably even like a C-. Like I think you're going to want to play it in your deck because of the effect of it being an attack reaction. But yeah, it costs 1, which is not particularly great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd see. All right, next up we have the Assassin Ranger hybrid card. Starting out with equipment again, we have Mask of Malicious Manifestations. It's Assassin Ranger equipment head. Defensor 1 at common. It says action 1 resource. Put a card from your hand or arsenal on the bottom of your deck. Destroy Mask of Malicious Manifestations. Reveal cards from the top of your deck until you reveal an attack action card. Put it in your hand, then shuffle. Go again, and it has Blade Break. Hayden, what are your thoughts on this one?
I can't tell if this is one of the worst names or best names of cards in the set. It's my first take on this card. I mean, I think this text is way less relevant than all the other masks we've looked at so far, to be honest. I think, like, yes, like guaranteeing an attack is going to get you out of jail on some hands, but it costs 1 to do so. I think the Blade Break is 80-90% of what this card is doing. And for that reason, I think it's like a little worse than some of the others, so I have it like a B-.
I had C+, but yeah.
In line with what you said for the rest, so makes sense. Next up is Toxic Tips. This is an Assessor/Ranger equipment arms. Defense for 1 has Blade Break and says action 1 resource, destroy Toxic Tips. The next attack action card you play this turn gains. When this hits a hero, create a Frailty, Inertia, Blood Rot Pox token under their control. Go again. I think, okay, first of all, this is an arms again, which I think is, there's a lot less competition for this slot. Has Blade Break. I think this action is like really relevant with Azuri and even with Azalea. Like the text, I think you can activate this a lot more in those decks than you would the Blade Break cards. So I honestly think like this is like a B+, maybe even A-.
I had it at B+. I think that this is still, action. It's just, so let's say you're multiple lines
broken if it's a reaction or an
instant. Yeah, it'd be broken. It'd be an A+. This is kind of one of those cards where I feel like if I'm playing something like a Benji, or not a Benji, but if I'm somehow going more wide with like maybe an Arachne, and I can get the sense that my opponent is not blocking with cards in order to have a pivot turn, this is kind of like an on-demand of like maybe I can force him to block my second card, or I get a ton of value. That's really where I see this text being used a lot. I had a B+.
Yeah, the text upside is like Blood Rot Pox, so is a resource for 2 damage, or maybe Frailty. Like the Frailty would be huge and get the full like 3 value off of it. But yeah, I mean, actually, I think it's a B+, because I think the value upside is pretty limited.
And you telegraph it, so
yeah, that's true.
All right, here we go. Yeah, this. Oh, I go. Death Touch. This is an Assassin Ranger attack action at rare. Red 1 cost, attacks for 6, defense for 2. It says Death Touch can't be played from hand. When this hits a hero, create a Frailty, Inertia, or Blood Rot Pox token under their control.
Oh, this is an A for me.
Yeah.
I think this is like
I had an A.
this
I think it's like best card, right? Like
one of the top cards, and I'm not ready to like commit to what I think is like the best pack on pick ones, but it's definitely in that echelon for me. The red I think is a solid A for me. I think even the yellow is like a B+, and probably the blue is still a B. Like it still has a breakpoint of 4. People might look at this and go, "You can't play it from hand." Like it has this like restrictive factor. It does. That's true. But, put it in your arsenal, play it the following turn from redraw, or, like play a non-attack action into Riptide's effect to, play a come to fight and then play this and come in for 9 or something. Like there is ways to get this in your arsenal. Obviously for Azalea, it's a bit tough with like Codex and Assassin, But also you can swap the sim with Azuri. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I think this is currently the highest pack one pick one for me, just because it's also a hybrid card, which is kind of crazy that it's so powerful in terms of its ability, but it's also hybrid and keeps you open. That's nuts.
Yeah, threaten's a 2-card, which costs 1 resource, so that you use, so you can dagger into this to like threaten the breakpoint better, and then is threatening like a 1 card for 8. That's huge.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Toxicity. This is a assassin/ranger non-attack action. It costs 0, defense for 2. It's at rare. It has a full cycle and says the next assassin or ranger attack action card you play this turn gains. When this hits a hero, they lose 5 life. Brendan, it's not Mothering Skies.
Let's go again as well. Yeah.
It doesn't. Yeah, the card phrase go again, but it doesn't give go. Yes. It's not Mothering Skies, as I've seen some people compare it to. I think this card is this. I'm going to give a build around for this. I think this is a build around like B-. Otherwise, I think it's like in the D's and C's. Like if you aren't able to ever push breakpoints for this, all you're doing is trading this for a card from your opponent's hand.
Okay, well, I got to go with what I wrote, and I think that it's like a C. It's like a C, except it is like build around Azuri and Azalea, where I think it could be incredibly good. We see multiple heroes in the set have less than 20 life. So, I mean, this is a 0 for 5. You have evasion via Azuri. You're swapping a card in. Are they just like, over blocking you? I think it's worse in Azuri than it is like something like Azalea, where if you can get that dominated arrow and you can get a 0 for 5 out of this, I think this card could actually be incredibly powerful. It's just tough because you are telegraphing this, but yeah, I don't know, Hayden. I don't like this card in Constructed, but I really like it in Limited, especially in something like Azalea, and I think it's also very feasible in Azuri.
Yeah, I mean, it's relevant, right? Like, if you have a good amount of ways in your deck to push damage, and, you're not playing into Ranger, like, this is a card that, like, if I'm playing Assassin and I'm playing into something like a Benji, a Katsu, or another Assassin, I know they have 0 to very limited access to defense reactions. This is a card that if I know I have attack reactions, I have my Azuri ability, I have potential like dominate attack, like this card is really interesting to me. I just think its grade is going to greatly vary. Like it's not a consistent card. It's a card that like if you play it telegraph face-up value, your opponent can block it. But if you have ways to push the damage and turn this into a 0 for 5, that is huge. I agree. So yeah, I mean the blue is also an interesting one to me as well.
Yeah, I mean there's got to be a few cards where I cast my dice for this one to go B+.
Fair enough. I mean, I have it as a build around like B-B, so I think we're similar. We're just kind of different execution, maybe.
All right. So next up, we have Virulent Touch. This is Assassin Ranger attack action at common. Red, cost 0, attacks for 4, defense for 2. It says Virulent Touch can't be played from hand. When this chain link resolves, this Virulent Touch is defended by a card from hand. Create a Bloodrock Pox token under the defending hero's control. Hey, what are your thoughts on this one?
So you go first. I really like this card. I think this card is really, really good.
Yeah.
I have the red at a B, and I have the yellow and blue at like a C+ to B-. The reason for that is, has that text line again of can't be played from hand, but when you do play it, it's a 0 for 4 at worst at red, which is still really good. And then also has this text that probably puts it in like the C+ range already, or in the C range. And then it also has this like really relevant text, which is like, if a card has blocked this, it's now taken a card and leaked the damage minimum and also presented 2 more damage with the Bloodrock Pox token. Also, the other thing is that means that like the blue and yellow like have some utility as well. So maybe B is a little bit high, maybe B- is a little bit more appropriate, but I do think this card is good.
I had it at B, and I think it depends. I think it really depends on the format, but I think it could creep up into B+ if like this is like a really good card to close. Because like this is tough to defend, right? At the end of the game, where you're going to get a Bloodrock Pox token if you defend with the card. So I think this card could potentially be a really good closer. And it's really tough because with how we're evaluating these cards on the limited set review, because these ones are hybrid cards, which has never been seen in Flesh and Blood, but we're seeing two extremely powerful cards that are hybrid cards. Like I think that if you're looking at something like Draft, like I mean, I think they get almost like an entire like half letter grade higher if they're even somewhat playable and they can keep you open. But again, it depends on the packs, like how many cards in the pack, how important is it to be in the right class, stay open, so contextual. Yeah.
Modality really messes with, I think, sort of evaluating cards without getting a lot of play experience behind them, because you can go, well, also defensive 2, which is a big downside. Well, but also it's a hybrid card, so that gives it upside again. So it is, I think, landing around that B is probably, B- is probably correct. Next up, we have Bloodrock Trap. This is a 0-cost assassin ranger defense reaction trap, defense for 3, and it's at red. No cycle to this again, and it says when this defends and the attacking hero has played it or activated a reaction, this chain link, create a Bloodrock Pox token under their control. Important to note that it's chain link, not this combat chain, so it has to be, they have to have basically played an attack reaction, then you play this as a defense reaction for it to be triggering.
Yeah. I have this as a C, but I think against something like Azuri, this is like a B plus, because I think you can just consistently get it off. As like a sideboard card, you bring it in for Azuri. I think it's triggering almost every single time you're playing it, which makes it busted. But overall, I think it's like a C at best.
I think it can't be worse than a C because it's like a defensive head jab. Like we just talked about, that 0 for 3s and they land around like a C that has go again. This allows you to still play out the rest of your hand, so it's kind of like a pseudo go again. It does have the restriction of needing your opponent to actually have attacked and get the full value of the 3. But, into matchups where you can trigger this, I think sideboard grade of like a B minus is like pretty reasonable. It is red though, so it is worse than some of the traps, but I think it's like a C, maybe sideboard grade, of a B minus. Again, you have to draw it at the right time.
All right, next up we have Frailty Trap. Assassin Ranger defense reaction trap at common, red, cost 0, defense for 3. It says when this defends an attack with go again, create a Frailty token under the attacking hero's control. Well, I think this card I think it's potentially kind of bad because like you're not going to play this onto a Kodachi, right? And they're probably Kodachiing first, so there goes the value of that Frailty token. I think in most case scenario, because like they're usually going to attack with a weapon, so this Frailty token, I just don't see it really doing much unless they're playing something out of Arsenal, and then like maybe you get 0 for 4 out of this. But I think frequently it's just a 0 for 3. I had this at a C.
I have this at like a C minus D plus. I think it's like a sideboard grade into Azuri, into Solitary Confinement, Awakening Solitary Confinement of like a C plus, B minus, because they're going to attack with a stealth card probably second, but then that doesn't trigger on the Spider's Bite. So like I agree with you, like the Frailty token kind of sucks. It's easy to trigger, so for Riptide it represents like a 0 for 4 kind of trade, but it's red and it's a little bit awkward and when you're actually playing it. So I honestly have this as like a C minus D plus, and for Riptide it's like a C at best, I think. Next up, we have the third of these traps. We have Inertia Trap. So it's an Assassin Ranger defense reaction trap, defense for 3, again at red, cost 0, and says when this defends an attack with greater than its base, create an Inertia token under the attacking hero's control. I think this is actually better than Frailty to a degree because I think that you get to play this mid-combat and potentially mess up what your opponent's trying to do with their arsenal for next turn. Maybe they're trying to set up a Death Touch or a Virulent Touch or something that they want to do next turn. And defend an attack that has greater power. Like there is a lot of these in this set between Ninja and Assassin and Ranger with aim counters. So I think this is better. I for some reason I had my grade like written down as a D plus, but I think this is just like a C to be honest for Riptide.
I had a C as well. All right, so on to the generics, starting out with another headpiece equipment. We have Seeker's Hood, generic equipment head at common. It says instant, 1 resource, destroy Seeker's Hood, prevent the next 1 damage that would be dealt to your hero this turn. Opt 1. Hayden, you go first.
All right, I have a lot to say about these equipment. So I'm basically just going to say a lot about Seeker's Hood, but I'm talking about all the Seeker's equipment when I talk about this card because they do the exact same thing, and there's 1 for each of the equipment slots. So I think the first thing to really understand is like how important is preventing 1 damage going to be in a lot of games, and it's really going to vary. But we've talked about a lot of on-hit effects and breakpoints and things like that. So it isn't nothing. The problem is if you're trading a full card for that, why didn't you just block with it? So I think Seeker's equipment gets better in multiples, just like it kind of did with
Quell.
Yeah, or even Ironhide in Monarch to a degree as well, or an instant to pair with it. And that's where I think Peace of Mind becomes like a much better card, which we'll talk about towards the end of this. It's a generic that prevents damage, cost 2. If you can pair that with a Seeker's Hood, now both those cards get a lot more value. You can pitch a blue, get the full value out of it to defend 5 damage, and then across a couple of different hits. So you could use the 1 resource to stop a Spider's Bite, so you don't get the trigger, especially if your opponent's on a big 5-card hand turn, and then use that. So I think the other thing you can do as well with this, it's really important to note, is like if you have this equipment and you have like a floating resource at the end of your turn, you can pay for 1 of the Bloodrock Pox damage, which is quite cool as well. So you just have like a random floating resource because you haven't, utilizing your resources is really hard in this. You can actually trade it in for definitely 1 damage prevention. So it turns into like a pseudo blade break against not being able to pay for a Bloodrock Pox. So there is like, I think once you start to think about these cards, there is a lot more than the face value. That being said, it doesn't have a defensive value. It does require you to use that resource in some games. It's not going to be it's not going to get the value you want it to. So I think this is like a C plus. I think it's still equipment. I think it's C to C plus. I think this is the worst of them because head is so competitive. So this is more like a C minus.
I'd C minus for this one. So let's rapid fire these. Next, we have Seekers Gillette. Oh, God, I don't know if you've heard the Dr. Disrespect spawn where like Gillette. I don't know, someone's gonna.
This is the best that Brendan can get. Apparently,
somebody's gonna have that stuck in their head now. Anyway, generic equipment chest, instant destroy Seekers Gillette, prevent the next 1 damage to be dealt by you this turn. Opt 1. Because the chest I had it as B plus. What did you have?
It's gilet, right? Like it's like I just realized it's like the name for a vest.
I mean,
it's a gilet. Sorry, I work in fashion. I definitely should know this.
All right,
it's a gilet. It is. So yeah, there you go. Pronunciation guide for your pre-release to not look silly. Seekers gilet. I think this is the second best. I think chest has the second. Boots is going to be the best, basically because it has like no competition. So I have this as a C plus.
Okay. I had it a bit higher, but yep. On to Seeker's mitts. No, these are just infinitely hard to grade as equipment. So yeah, Seeker's mitts, arms, instant 1 resource, destroy the mitts, prevent the next 1 damage to be dealt. To hear this turn, opt 1. Hayden, what'd you have?
See, I think this is like on par with where you're valuing just like an average card in your deck, and you it's competing with it, but less than the hit spot. So like a C. I do just want to quickly talk about the relevance of the opt. Like it is relevant. And I think that is something that is important to understand. I don't want to trade a full resource for my opt, but if I'm trading a resource for a damage and an opt on something even like a Blood Rot Pox token at the end of a turn to set up my draw, I'm not sad about that. So I do just want to say like that is relevant.
Okay. On to Seeker's leggings. So same thing, but with the legs. I had an A. Does it compete with anything at legs?
It doesn't compete with anything. I don't have it in an A. I have it at a B. I think it's on line with like the other equipment because it's not. It's like I'd rather have Blade Break.
Yeah, it's not a bomb, but like,
but it's not competing.
We need to develop a new system for freaking equipment, man. It doesn't.
You might. I think it's probably in that B range somewhere. B minus, B plus. Like I think it's competing with those sort of similar cards. I think you're not going to be sad if you just don't have a leg piece, I think is what you're going to find in this format. Like if you just don't have the Seeker's leggings, I mean, you definitely don't care about the sandals, I think, for in this very niche cases. But like if you don't have this, like, I'd for instance, if we're comparing this to Bs, I'd rather have almost any of the other Bs.
I wouldn't first pick this. So it's definitely not an A. Like if we look at something like Tales of Aria, like Deep Blue, like you would first pick. Like that card is better than all the other cards. So
Plume of Evergrowth, like the equipment in that set was so crazy.
All right. On to Silken Gi. Generic equipment chest, common. It says instant destroy Silken Gi. The next attack action card you play this turn has -1 attack and cost 1 less to play. I thought this was
this one.
Yeah, I thought it was good, to be honest. I mean, I mostly thought about it in Ninja. So I mean, I think the most important thing is like if you have on hit effects, like this just gets a lot better. Maybe, right? Because like does 1 resource always equate to 1 damage? I think 1 resource equates to more than 1 damage on most cards, actually, right?
Yes, that's the important thing to weigh up is like a resource on card cost often equates to, like around 2 damage, I think, which is really important, and this doesn't cost you a card. I think Ninja, this is going to be really relevant for setting up some really crazy turns where you're trying to cheat out on resources and maybe play off 1 blue, but play like 4 even attacks. I think this is also like relevant for Assassin to, Spider's Bite into a 2 cost. Like, yes, you are trading the 1 attack, but you're potentially getting back with Spider's Bite. And on maybe you've even played like multiple attacks, then you get the value out of it. So I think you need to look to get the value out of this. But I think this is like, I have this at B minus. I think it's like, there's other cards that I'm going to want, but I think in some decks you're going to really want this card.
I'm wondering if this card is just pure value, right? It's because like, can you get more than 1 out of this? If you can get 2 out of your equipment effectively, right, by reducing the cost, you're gaining and losing a damage, you still net 2 damage on top of it. Like
that's huge.
It's busted. Like it's absolutely first pickable in that case. Like if you can ever get 2 out of your equipment rather than 1, like you're just above. Yeah. So I don't know. It's hard for me to say sort of in our little vacuum right now, but I think this might be really, really good. I'd be.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the other chest equipment that we're about to talk about is better, but
interesting. Okay. Yeah. Why don't you read it
I'll explain why. Yeah. Let's just go straight into it. 3-bear tunic. Generic equipment chest, no defensive value, instant. Destroy 3-bear tunic, gain 1 resource, that's an instant. And activate this ability only if you have no cards in hand. Now, the reason, I have this basically the same grade, but the reason I think that this is probably going to end up being better is that I think with like Rangers in particular and like the Arsenal card, you can often like play with no cards after that and be in need of a resource. I think it allows you to do things like have an arrow in your arsenal and then on your turn play off no card hand. Like you block out and still present back a 3 to try and take back some tempo in a game. Now, I don't think this format is super tempo based, which is important. But yeah, like something like Spring Load out of Arsenal, you know, you get the double effect, no cards in hand, coming for 5 damage, Death Touch, things like this. I think this is, some games you're going to end with this and play, and you're like, oh, man, I didn't get value out of that. And sometimes this card is just going to be super friggin' clutch and do work, which is interesting.
Yeah, I think this card is kind of busted, maybe, right? Because like on demand, you can have the one card, you can have the one cost in your arsenal, you can defend the entire turn, and then you can just go to value town. Yeah, I think this is.
You can also even just do like stuff like have a 2 cost in arsenal.
Yeah.
And just be like dagger into 2 cost. And to be honest, it does really require you to play on Arsenal, but I think these games, this format to me doesn't look particularly fast. So I think there is going to be time to do that. Now, that could change in draft. We always look silly and the formats are being a lot faster than I think, especially with like ninjas and being able to string together stuff. But my early take is that this is like a B.
Okay, A minus for me. I think it's actually nuts.
All right, cool. Next I like that you're higher than me on that.
Next up, Fisticuffs, generic equipment arms at common, says attack reaction, 2 resources, destroy fisticuffs, target attack action, gains +1. So this is satisfying attack reaction clauses. It has threat of activation. The entire game seems really good. It's kind of expensive.
Yeah, but I don't care because, like you say, threat of activation is always going to be high. I think this is huge in the ninjas where you talk about like attack reaction satisfaction and satisfying those abilities, and you want a lot of blues in those. I think it's mostly relevant in there, but like just threat of activation for on-hit effects is huge. Like, okay, say you're playing Ranger, they come in with one of these arrows that has the on-hit effect of creating like a Blood Rot Pox token. They have a card in hand. You're sat there being like, okay, well, I could double block this and soak up the damage. What if that card in hand is just like a crappy blue they're happy to trade in to then get like 3 damage? I'm, like, where am I at in this game? So I think Fisticuffs is like a B+.
I'd B+.
Might even be an A-.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'd B+. All right, next up we have Snapdragons at home. I mean, Fleetfoot Sandals, generic equipment legs. Attack reaction, destroy Fleetfoot Sandals. Target attack with 1 or less base attack gets go again. I just
got my notes.
Yeah, go for it. I just
had. Oh, you had a C. Interesting. I have saves an awkward Dachi ? Blue Benji card. I don't know. D. Like
okay, yeah. I mean,
I don't know where. Like, if this reminds me of what was the equipment that like always went like second to last pick, and reminds me of what people did with Glacial Horns. Even though Glacial Horns was crazy, people would draft that so low, and that card was crazy. And this card is like does probably nothing in most decks.
Yeah, I think this is like one of the worst equipment I've seen ever.
I agree, and the art is hilarious because of it as well.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Humble. This is so we're into some of the generic attack actions now. So this is at rare generic action attack, cost 2, defense for 2, and at rare attacks for 6. There's a cycle and says when this hits a hero, that hero loses all abilities until the end of next turn. So treat the hero card as if the text box is empty. So if you've ever played with Sleep Dart, this is effective generic Sleep Dart on a stick. I think these grades kind of cascade for me. I think red is like a solid B. I mean, I think basically because power. I think power in the bottom left-hand corner is really important in the set. There's not a lot of, you look at sets like Welcome to Wraith, you look at sets like Monarch even, you look at sets even like Uprising. There's a lot of cards that just have like good return for value when you put 2 cards into them. There's not a lot of that in the set. It really requires like weapons or a bit of like augmentation. This is just like 2 card for 6 at red, and it has a really relevant on effect. I think it's like a B, and then yellow and blue are like C's.
Maybe these cards would be nice in Ninja. I guess but the thing is Ninja doesn't have Flick Flack in this set. Like if Ninja had Flick Flack, the ability to go Kadachi 2 for 6 is good because you can Flick Flack.
It's still 2 for 7 though.
Yeah,
Kadachi
2 for 7. Yeah,
2 for 7.
But then on the opposing side of the turn cycle, you would Flick Flack plus get a bunch of value. But yeah, I don't know. I'd see. I just thought it was more of a role player, but yeah. Just not too sure about that. Infectious Host is the next one. Generic action attack at rare red, cost 0, attacks for 4, defense for 2. It says when this attacks a hero, if you control a frailty token, create a frailty token under their control, then repeat for inertia and Blood Rot Pox. I had this as a C. I effectively saw this as like a 0 for 4, the defense for 2.
Oh, I'm glad you went first. This is a B+. Okay. I think this card is really, really good, and I could be wrong on this, but based on how the format plays out, but I think tokens and breakpoints and things are really important. That's kind of my early take on this format, and there's going to be a lot of exchanges of tokens, especially depending on the type of deck you're playing, and just defense being a little bit lower than I would like it to be. So I think this is at worst at red. So at red, I have it at B+. I think at worst, it's a 0 for 4. And at best, this is going to represent like a 0 for 6. And that is huge. That's exactly where I want to be. So and because all the tokens pop at end of turn, if you have any of these tokens, you're always going to get the mirrored effect, which is really powerful, I think. So I think at red, this is a B+. I honestly think this is like maybe my top 5 cards I'm looking to first pick because it's generic as well. Like this is up there with like Death Touch and stuff for me. Not quite as good as Death Touch, but it's up there for me. I think the yellow and blues are like C pluses, but even those, because this isn't an on-hit effect, it's just a trigger effect when you play it, so you always get the effect. I actually think even those could be B minuses depending on how the format shakes out.
Interesting.
We'll see.
Okay. Here you go.
Looking for a scrap. This is a 1 cost generic at rare, defense for 2, and at red has 4 attack, and says, as an additional cost to play looking for a scrap, you may banish a card with 1 attack from your graveyard. When you do, this gains +1 attack and go again. There you go first.
Well, are there any generics that you can get at blue that attack for 1? You know, like that's the question. It's like, can you facilitate this via just like other generic cards? Is like my biggest question.
Class cards you can. You have all those like stealth
Feisty
class cards
locals is one.
Yes. I think that might be it, to be honest. I think all the rest of
Spring Load.
Yeah, Spring Load at yellow is one, but not yet. But then otherwise you're looking at class cards, so Ninja and Assassin.
Which makes it much more narrow. So I had this card rated pretty highly, to be honest. I had a B+, but I just think that it seems somewhat easy to pull off, especially Ninja. I would just really have to go look at the set and figure out what cards exactly have 1 attack and how easy you can pull it off. But like 1 for 5 with Go Again, 1 for 5 with Go Again is just absolutely nuts.
100%, I agree. If you can consistently put this to a 1 for 5, I think you're in the B range, B+ range pretty solidly. I mean, a 1 for 5 Go Again, like that's similar to the League Tap with Upside, and I think I had that around like a B, and that's like you have to work harder for this, I think, potentially depending on your deck. So, and then like a 1 for 4 with no Go Again.
No Go Again. That's the thing, is like the floor is kind of ass.
But it's generic, and 1 for 4, like, so even if you like Assassin Dagger into this or something and then play this, it's like 2 card for 5. It's not terrible. It could be 2 card for 6 because of what representing with Spider's Bite. I think this is probably going to be like a C to a C+, and then in the right decks like a B- to B, I think.
All right, next up we have Wreak Havoc. This is generic action. Attack at rare. Red costs 2, attacks for 6, defense for 2. Defense reactions can't be played to wreck Havoc's Chain Link. When this hits a hero, you may turn a card in their arsenal face up, then destroy a defense reaction in their arsenal. Hayden?
I think this is worse than Humble.
Yeah, definitely.
Because of the on-hit effect being less relevant. And yes, defense reactions are relevant, but a lot of the time the opponent's not even going to play them from arsenal. They're going to be playing them from hand. So I think this is like a C+ at red, because I do think that bottom left-hand corner is really relevant. I think just good quality attacks in this format are a bit harder to come by. And then I think the rest are like C to C minuses, depending on the deck.
I had C.
Next up, we have... Oh, somehow I've missed this card. We have Cut Down to Size, which says... What does it say, Brendan? I can't read it. It's a common. It defends for 2, and it red attacks for 6, and says...
When this hits a hero, if they have 4 or more cards in hand, they discard a card. Boom. Yep. 2020 vision, baby. Sorry. So for people who don't know, we have a document with all the cards, and this one wasn't included, so we're looking at the tiny OBS screen.
Definitely my fault. I set up the document. I think this is similar to Wreak Havoc. I think slightly better on hit effect because it means your opponent can't keep 5-card hands, 4-card hands. So I think that's really good into Ninja in particular. So I think this is probably around like a C+ at red for me.
Yeah, I put it at C just because it feels like a bit of a nombo. Like people are just going to block this, right? It's just have 4 more cards in hand. Yeah, it's good. It's good. It does force them to block, but I think just a C for me.
Okay, I can see C. I think that's fair. All right, next up we have Destructive Deliberation. Again, the art on the set, man. This is a generic attack action. Ends for 2, costs 2, and at red attacks for 5, and says when this hits a hero, create a Ponder token.
You're going first here.
Damn it. Okay. Me and Brendan trying to trade to see who's going first, to see who might look silly. Ponder's good, but the offset of the power is definitely not irrelevant. So I think red and yellow are the particular ones you're looking at. I think blue is pretty bad, although it does have an on-hit effect. I think I would give this somewhere around the, what's the card? Humble. So I think it's like a B minus to C plus at yellow and red, and then I think the blue is pretty average probably. I think in the right deck though, where you can really utilize this Ponder token, I think you're probably a solid like B minus to B.
Yeah, I had C, but just not super sure on like how good that Ponder token is and if it's worth the reduction in attack. Like it really depends
really
on I think the format. To be honest,
I agree. It's really hard to know.
All right, next up we have Feisty Locals. This is generic attack action at common, red, cost 0, attacks for 3, defends for 2. It says if this is defended by an action card, this has +2. So, yeah, I mean, this is tough because you're giving your opponent the agency to usually give you the 0 for 5 or not. The best case scenario is if you put them in a scenario where they can only defend with an action card, or, their non-attack action card is super key to their turn or something like that. Nevertheless, I think this is like a C. I just don't see it becoming a 0 for 5 a lot, but the potential upside is there.
Yeah, it does have some narrow potential upside. I think it's like a C minus, to be honest. I think maybe even a D plus. I think you don't really want this card, but Ninja can maybe utilize the red and the blue as a 0 cost, and it has some relevant text for in game. So and with a pump, like it's like okay, you pump this with like a come to fight or something after a dagger attack. Is your opponent not going to block like 6 and just take 6, or are they going to throw 2 cards at it and still take damage? That's where I think it turns into. It
reminds me of Surging Militia, but like way worse.
Me too. I had that in my
notes.
Like
a way worse. I don't know. It seems kind of bad to be honest. I think
but Surging Militia was like a B. Like that card.
That card was
like
nuts.
Good.
So it's like way.
Red
worse.
was like a B plus. Yeah, that card was so good.
Yeah, so I think Feisty Locals might actually be pretty bad.
I think a C minus is probably where I'm going to land on it, but it could go either way depending on the deck. Next up, we have Freewheeling Renegades. Generic attack action, defense 2, cost 1, and at red attacks for 6, and says if this is defended by an action card, this has -2. It sounded so good until we got to that text box, Brendan. So 1 for 4 if it's defended by an action card.
Yeah, that sucks. It's definitely.
I think the blue is the relevant card because you can trade up on cards from your opponent. So you trade like an average blue because you want like a good number of blues. So at the end of the chain, you have this blue left over that costs 1. That's good cross structure being 1, and you're like threatening 4 damage if they don't give you a card. So you get a card and probably a better card than your card, which is good.
I could see that. It's just tough for me to evaluate cards like that because when I think about how I would want my blue base to ideally land, I would probably want just like mono blue come to fights. Like I probably wouldn't want anything else. So it's like,
we all want that.
Yeah, we all want that. So
but you can't have all that, right? So I guess this is like, what do I want my blues to do in the set? I want them to either block 3 or I want them to have some utility to be played from hand. And I think this one does that. Don't get me wrong. I still think this is like a C minus, maybe a C at best, but like the blue is the better of the cycle. I just kind of want to point that out, I think.
Yeah, I think C minus for me on that one.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, Ravenous Rabble. Generic action attack, common, red, cost 0, attacks for 5, blocks for 2. But it says when this attacks, reveal a top card of your deck. This gets -X, where X is the pitch value of the card revealed this way. Go again. I feel like Ravenous Rabble is just like more of a C plus in limited. But yeah, no, C plus for me.
Yeah. All these decks want to play blues, and all these decks want to play at least probably 8 to 10 blues, and some decks want to play more, and that can be a problem. I tell you what, if you Azuri this in there, you get yourself as 5 cost attack. It's got to go again. It's not it's not terrible because you don't trigger that first ability. But yeah, I think this is like a C to C plus, and the deck dependent. One of the cool things you can do with like Riptide is you can like play this out. And you do have some opt effects to maybe like set it up beforehand as well, and like some of the top card like scout the periphery, things like that. You can know what it's going to come in for. Then that triggers your Riptide hero ability. You can put an arrow in. You come in for the arrow afterwards. So there is some utility to this, but I think it's going to land around a C to C plus.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, Seek Horizon, another reprint. Just going through some reprints here. This is a 0 cost generic action attack. At common this time, it was rare when it was previously printed in Monarch. Defense for 2 and then red attacks for 4. And says an additional cost to play Seek Horizon, you may put a card from your hand on top of your deck. When you do, Seek Horizon gains go again. I think LSS have printed these cards in here because they want to be careful about the number of cards they print with go again for constructed. So they just use reprints, I think, is honestly what they've done this for. But it helps for limited. So that's really what I think it is. And it helps enable things that we just talked about with like Riptide. It helps enable like utilizing your hand, because the worst feeling about Flesh and Blood is like being stuck with cards in hand or not being able to block in a good way. Worst case, this is a 0 for 4 at red, which is, that's fine and serviceable. The other colors are pretty trash, I think. I don't actually think you're going to use this for going in that often, but it's going to save some hands that would otherwise be awkward. I think this is landing around a C to C plus.
Yeah, so I mean 0 for 4, but you gotta put the card on top of your deck. which is
You don't have to though.
Oh, yeah, because you don't need to go again. I'm saying,
The main,
if you want to go again, I think this card is decent in Azalea. To be honest, like we've never seen it played with Azalea, but I think in Azalea it's gonna come out quite nicely if you draw this with like an arrow in your hand. You put the arrow on top, you Azalea it in. I could. Other than that, I never liked playing with Seeker Eyes even when it was that rare.
No, it was bad in the last set, and I think it was better in the last set because of like meat axe and stuff like that. So yeah.
All right, next up we have Spring Load. This is generic attack action at common. Red, cost 1, attacks for 2, defense for 2, and it says when this attacks, if you have no cards in hand, this gains +3. I think this is a B-. Like I think you're really going to be able to trigger this a lot. I think this is a great card.
I really like this card. Yeah. I'm on board. I think I had C plus red, but I said maybe even B- in some decks. I think like costing 1 and being a really relevant attack to play either out of Arsenal as the last card or out of hand as the last card is going to be super, super relevant. I think ending with an Arsenal in this format is not as relevant as some others. Compare it a little bit to Uprising for me. Like I think setting up 5-card hands is not actually as important as other sets, and so a card like Spring Loaded has a bit more value than maybe it would in some other sets. And yeah, I'm really on board with this card, to be honest. I think
because this card is probably very frustrating, to be honest. Because like in something like Ninja, if you were able to play a more like mid-rangey Ninja build and you were able to consistently defend, right, you could just like 2-card 7 this very consistently. That's a lot.
Yeah, really. Yep. I think the other colors, just quickly to touch on, are probably not as good and probably C minuses. But yeah, I mean, this card, I actively want reds in my deck if it supports it well.
All right. Oh, reliable, baby.
Come to Fight, another reprint. Generic action, non-attack action. It defends for 3. It costs 1. And at red, it says the next attack action card you play this turn gains +3 attack. Go again. And of course, yellow is +2, blue is +1. A reprint from Arcane Rising, a fan favorite pack. And I've got to say, I think a genius reprint, to be honest, because pumps are really important in this format. Again, playing out your hand, I think can sometimes be a little bit difficult in this format. I think this card is, I honestly think the red card is like up there for like first pick all cards.
Oh, the blue is so good too. Like,
yeah, blue's good as well, right? Because it's just a blue, but I'm not first picking that card. I just think it's good. But I think the red, because of the versatility of this card, how good it is in Ranger, how good it is in Assassin, even it's fine in Ninja, although at worst, I think it still blocks 3, which is good. So I think I have this like a B- for red and like C+ for the rest.
So funny, I have B+. I mean, you talked about first picking it. I think B+ is appropriate for Come to Fight. Come to Fight just felt so good in every in formats I played it in. Like, I think this card is really, really strong.
So I agree. Like in a weak pack, I think this is a first pick. It leaves you open, which is really good. I think it starts to come down when you're comparing this to. So like I compare this to like Spike with Frailty or Lace with and that sort of thing. It is not as good as those cards once you're in that class. Like that is just hands down. And I'm giving those cards like B+. So I think I have to give this like a B- when I'm looking at it comparatively. But don't get me wrong. If this is like a good way to stay open, I mean it is a good way to stay open in draft, and the card's good. Defensive 3. At worst.
All right, next up we have Scout the Periphery. It says generic, non-attack action, a common, red, cost 0, defense for 2. It says look at the top card of target hero's deck. The next attack action card you play from Arsenal this turn gains +3 and it has go again. So the Arsenal play from Arsenal's turn, it's pretty narrow, to be honest. Like I do think this just slots well into Azalea. Yeah, I mean it slots great into Azalea. Right, because you're gonna.
It's good in Riptide as well.
Yeah,
really good in Riptide.
It's a good Ranger card.
You play it from hand, you trigger the Riptide ability, and you put the card in Arsenal. Then you play it from Arsenal as well. So I actually think it's better in Riptide because of the cheat. But I mean, Azalea's still going to want to play arrows from. I actually think Azalea's just going to end up favoring attack actions a bit more, like non-arrow attack actions a little more than Riptide would, which is interesting. But this card does have a downside. It's really relevant. I think at red, it's going to be a card that you do want. It's the worst of the pumps, I think, or there or thereabouts for the Rangers even. And in other classes, it's particularly close to maybe even unplayable for some of them, depending on how they're playing out their turns. So I think it's like a C and even like a D in like yellow and blue, probably.
Okay, yeah. I think it might be like a B- in Azalea, but I think I'm wrong. Oof. In Azalea, I just think that look at the top card of the deck is actually relevant, and like the conditional drawback is never going to be relevant in Azalea, or should never be. But other than that, I do think this card is like pretty bad outside of Ranger.
Yeah, it just means you can never play the attack from hand if you do have attack actions in your deck, which you will, because there is good attack actions in the set. And the other thing as well is like, I think we're just valuing Azalea's hero ability a little bit differently. I am just not that excited about it, although I will admit, like, from experience in Arcane Rising draft, it is definitely relevant in draft. I think it's a lot better in draft than it is in sealed, though. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, we've got Brush Off, generic instant, our first instant, cost 0, and at red says the next time you would be dealt 3 or less damage this turn, prevent it. At yellow it says 2 or less, at blue it says 1 or less. I think the only reason to play this card is because it just help you just use your hand up if you need, but it's like worse than Sigil. Like it's a Sigil type effect, Sigil Souls type effect, but worse. And I don't know, the blue pitch is a 0 cost, so you might end up playing it in your Kadachi decks, but it's like a D.
Yeah, I think it's like close to an F. Like I think this card is like it's D minus. I think like the fact that it's narrow and it like if it was it'd be dealt 4 or less, or like if it was prevent 4, I don't know. But like the fact that this is on rate with Sigil, but it is also narrow. It's just kind of this card is freaking terrible. I think.
So I'm going to give you the flip side to why I think this card is playable though for certain decks, and that is because half the heroes don't. Well, 2 of the 6 heroes do not have access to defense reactions, and then another 2 of those heroes have access to, I would say, pretty bad defense reactions. I think so. I do think this could be relevant into decks that are going to rely on a lot of defense reactions. I think at red, you're often going to get the full value out of this in basically every deck, and at worst in Katsu, you can throw it away to your Katsu ability. Like I do think
card though. Ugh.
Yes, I agree. I do think it's a D, but what I want to point out is I think this card is a bit more playable than it looks at face value. It reminds me a little bit more of a card in terms of playability, like Healing Balm, than a card like, I don't know, Liquefy or something. Like I do think this has some value to
It's
it.
one of those cards where I just hope my opponents played against me. It's like my memorial ground of this set, I think. All right, next up we have Peace of Mind. This is much better than the last one. Generic instant at common. Red costs 2, so the next time you would be dealt damage, attack damage that is, this turn, prevent 4 of that damage, and it has create a ponder token. Well, so this card isn't narrow. It's like prevent 4 of that damage. It can be any sort of damage. It has to be attack damage, but it can be any numerical value. And you create a ponder token. I think this can be utilized well with the equipment, which is what we talked about. I still put this as a C minus, but I think that I'm just generally biased towards these effects and limited. I kind of hate them. Like they can sometimes be good in draft when you get a critical maximum of them, and you can fatigue people because you're playing a 40 card deck and they have a 30 card deck. But yeah, I mean, this is definitely better than the last one. I have it at C minus, but I can be talked up to a C.
I won't be talking you up to it. I'll tell you what. I don't like effects that are non-symmetrical. Like only have one get to be played on one side of the table. In terms of you can't defend with it and attack with it. You can only do one or the other. I think those cards really suffer in limited. The create a ponder token is not irrelevant, right? Like that is a big part of this text. So I think you really want to have a Seeker's equipment to like make value of this. But if you can pitch a blue, play this, and use your Seeker's equipment, and then on your turn come in with like an attack for 6 or something, and then draw a card to Arsenal, this is representing value. Like I maybe I could talk myself at least up to like a C. But the problem is like if your opponent has no attacks that come in for like 4 or greater for the turn, they just come in for like a 3, or they come in with like a couple of weapons, then like a stealth for 3 or something. You're not getting the full value out of this, and it starts to get worse. You're probably struggling to even get you probably still get the Seeker's value. That's fine, but yeah, and also the good thing with Seekers, you get to opt.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so you're getting
into the Ponder token, which is really important. As well.
2 card 5 Ponder token and opt. You do lose the equipment, which I'm not really factoring in, but 2 card 5 Ponder token opt. Is that good enough to be playable? Is the question.
I think it is. I think I will at red. I will play this more often than I won't. Definitely in sealed, and probably in at least Ranger, and probably mostly Ranger. I think, and at least some Assassin decks. I'm probably gonna play this more often than I would think. So I think I'm probably gonna go C with red, and then like C minus to D's for the rest of them.
Oh yeah, I actually think like the other colors might be like super Fs. Like they might be really really bad. Yeah,
better than Brush Off.
Maybe.
Well, Ponder token is real, and if you are pairing this with the Seeker's equipment, you get to opt first and then pop the Ponder token to get 2 goes at getting a really good Arsenal card. Like that is good. So effectively, okay, this card replaces itself, so don't worry about that. So you're paying a blue resource card to prevent 5 damage. That's pretty good. Like if you can set that up the right way. So yes, it's a bit narrow, it's a bit awkward, and I'm not saying all of a sudden it's a blue for 5 damage, but it is. It can be. That's definitely the level of that card. So yeah.
I think the yellow and blue might be unplayable, but I could be wrong.
I'm not disagreeing.
The upside of Brush Off is like you said with Katsu, you can actually ship it to the Kadachis. But yep.
I think just don't immediately chuck this in your unplayable pile is what I want to say.
I mean, for me, it's right over there. All right, Hayden, that is all the cards, sir.
We've done it. That has got to be a record time for our limited set review. I think we're a lot more concise than we have been in the past. I think we've done this a bit now. We're starting to get pretty seasoned at it. I hope that you enjoyed this limited set review. I really think, honestly, I think we've nailed a lot of these cards from a grade perspective. Of course, we could turn around and be wrong next weekend, but I do feel like I'm already starting to get a pretty good handle on this limited format. I'm really excited to play it. I think this is... maybe it's a part of me with just like hope because I love limited so much and I've just been begging for a great limited set, and obviously Uprising was not that as much as I did like Uprising. It wasn't a great limited set, so maybe I'm a little bit biased and just a little bit sort of keeping my hopes a little bit high. But this format looks really deep. The 6 heroes is really interesting. I think draft is going to be an interesting sort of puzzle. I think these hybrid cards keeping you open. I think there's some really powerful rares, which traditionally we don't see powerful rares, right, Brendan? A lot of the time it's like your commons are doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but some of these rares are really important and they're going to be cards you fight for early.
Yeah. If you had to, like, let's say you were going to a pre-release tomorrow and you could land on any hero you want and you were trying to win, which one would you ideally want to land on?
I would take the one that I think is probably going to be the easiest to play.
Okay, let's go with power level. Which one do you think is the most powerful?
Oh, I don't know. I honestly don't know.
I think Ranger looks a little bit pushed. Like the cards look really, really good. And just like overall...
yes, but you don't have a weapon, which is always difficult.
True. That's
I would say, okay.
Our grades were higher for Ranger than any other class, by far.
On average, were they?
Yeah,
okay.
We had a lot more Bs and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there are some really good cards there. I think the no weapon really offsets that, though, which is important. Like, those cards are good, but weapon offsets that. I think it's probably a ninja. I really like playing with Kadachis. It's probably Benji for sealed, to be honest. I think Benji has a lot of upside in sealed because it's a lot harder. Games are going to go a little longer than draft. It's harder for opponents to stop those breakpoints to get that value. I'm going to have Chaff in my deck that's going to get unblockability later in the game. I think Benji might have the highest win rate this weekend at pre-release.
Yeah, for sure.
What about you?
I'd probably be looking at a Ranger. I think those cards look really powerful, but you're right. Like, honestly, in a pre-release, I'm going to be playing at so many people playing Pile. I think in the context of doing that, I probably would pick a ninja, just because Kadachi's... Kadachi's alone will punish that strategy. It's like, it's not going to be viable whatsoever. But yeah, the Ranger cards look really good. Like, they look much better than like Arcane Rising Ranger cards, which I thought were decent.
Yep, completely agree. I think my last kind of like advice is, I think you want to make sure you've got a good number of red arrows to go into Ranger, and you want some of these pumps. They're going to be really important.
Pumps, for sure.
I think I had we talked about this on Limited Time Only with Yuanji, but he really talked me around on Riptide. I was pretty down on Riptide in Sealed, but I think Yuanji was like convincing me that maybe Riptide is probably the better of the two in Sealed at least. So we'll see. That's going to do it for episode 101 of Arsenal Pass. This is the Outsiders Limited Set Review. Had a lot of fun doing this, Brendan. I am actually now just super... I cannot wait for the pre-release. Got to wait another week, but I'm super hyped. And we will be breaking down all things Limited post the pre-release as well. And then we're getting into some draft, which also I can't wait to be doing. So I don't know, any final words, Brendan?
Nope, nothing from me. I'm also excited, and hopefully my pre-releases are not sold out. But yeah, I'm gonna try to get out to some. Also, I'm moving to a new apartment like that weekend as well. So I can only squeak in one or two, but I'm pumped either way.
Cool. Well, best of luck with your move. I friggin' hate moving.
Me too.
You want to find us on Twitter? I'm at Fian_Dale. This guy's at Brendan APG. And join in the discourse. Big shout out to all of our Arsenal Pass patrons. Got a few things that have gone up this month on there. Limited time only. Check it out. We've got a couple of other videos coming this month, I think, as well on different things. And otherwise, until next week, we'll see you in the next pod.
See everybody.